We discover that 100 years ago, a meteor from another world crashed into the demon realm. A terrifying creature then says that, although the young man toyed with that realm using his strange power, this is where his journey ends. It asks what wish brought the young man all the way there. The protagonist replies that it was the wish to return to the place he once called home. Mocking him, the great dragon says that for someone who risked his life to challenge it, that wish is insignificant. Even more so because the young man knew he could never achieve it, even before he arrived there. Because the dimensional orb that allows travel between dimensions is inside his heart. Smiling, the young man asks if the creature has any idea how much he had to suffer to find it. He then reveals that he has already been in that cursed world for 100 years. Preparing to strike, the dragon says that in that case, he should consider himself lucky, because his insignificant existence ends here. Proving otherwise, the protagonist says he can finally bring things to an end, as his body radiates a powerful light, which ends up frightening the great dragon. Confused, the creature asks what that disturbing light is, and why the young man's wounds are healing. Looking closer, the dragon concludes that it's no ordinary healing ability. Fully regenerated, the protagonist asks if the monster will remove the dimensional orb on its own, or if he'll have to rip it out. With wide eyes, the creature realizes it's not dealing with an ordinary warrior. But suddenly, something strikes it, making it spit out black goo from its mouth. Grabbing what he needs, our boy apologizes and says he's waited long enough, not even giving the dragon a chance to react. After the attack, the great beast simply collapses to the ground. Min-Soo, hunter and healer, observes the glowing item. Frey asks if he spent 100 years just to destroy a damn demon dragon ball. Telling him to shut up, the protagonist absorbs the dimensional orb. After a few minutes, what appears to be a large portal opens beneath his feet. Smiling, he says he's finally going home, to his disciples and his younger brother, who are on planet Earth. After a long journey, he awakens in the middle of a forest. Startled, the protagonist sits up abruptly, then calls out for Frey. Frey asks if the boy wants food and says he's busy vomiting in his stomach from motion sickness. Getting to his feet, the protagonist tells him to just digest it already. Frey asks if he's sure, since the result might not be very pleasant. The boy tells him to shut up before he ends up vomiting too, then asks if this is Earth since the landscapes vary depending on the location. With a hand on his chin, the protagonist says the mana flow feels similar to being inside a portal, but suddenly he realizes something is wrong. Frey asks if he was a fraud all along. Yelling, Min-Soo says this can't be happening again, referring to the fact that he's now at only 20% of his strength due to a side effect of dimensional travel. A mysterious voice then says the boy had better recover quickly before he gets kicked out. The protagonist says it's not that simple, as last time it took him decades to fully recover. Frey is outraged, but our boy says his abilities can still be used. In another part of the forest, we see a frightened girl who lost track of her companions while fleeing for her life. She wonders why the hell there's an orc this early in the dungeon. Screaming for help, the girl ends up tripping on a rock and falling flat on her face. Looking back, she braces for death, but suddenly Min-Soo appears and after taking down the creature, says he has a question to ask. He then asks if this is Earth. Terrified, the girl says yes. Quickly, the protagonist discovers he's in Korea in the year 2037. Thinking aloud, he says he was sucked into another dimension in 2027, which means 100 years in the demon realm equals only 10 years on Earth. Curious, our boy asks who the president is. Confused, the girl says it's Choi Dae-soo. Annoyed, the protagonist asks if she's talking about the brute with one missing eye scaring the girl again. We find out that Min-Soo and Choi Dae-soo do not have a good relationship. He then questions whether there really was no one better for the job, while the girl wonders if she's living in one of those regression stories. Unbothered, the protagonist asks if they're inside a portal. Smiling, the girl says that this is the inside of the tutorial tower which appeared a few years ago and functions as a portal for hunters. If someone completes the tower, they can awaken their abilities and gain new skills, and the higher their ranking, the better the guilds they can join. Stretching, Min-Soo asks if he just needs to clear the tower to leave. The girl says yes, but it takes at least 8 weeks, unless he's really skilled like Ryu Jawan, who cleared the place in 3 weeks and is considered a genius. The protagonist takes a deep breath. Suddenly, a massive striped tiger appears in front of them. Intrigued, the girl wonders if that's really a troll tiger, then says they need to run. After thinking for a moment, our boy says 3 weeks is far too long, and that his mana flow is slow, which is making his body not move the way it should. Shouting, the hunter asks if the academy didn't teach him to run when facing a troll tiger. Showing he's not the type to run, Min-Soo strikes the tiger without even turning around, and says that 5 days should be enough to clear the tower. Elsewhere, someone informs Min-Sejin, master of the Empire Guild, that a hunter has just exited the tutorial tower. Surprised, the man says that's not bad since it's only been 8 weeks since the hunters entered. The girl in front of him then says the problem is that the person wasn't on the original entry list. There's no record proving they even entered the tower, and now the young man is causing trouble outside. Upon seeing a photo of Min-Soo, Min-Sejin widens his eyes, showing that he knows our boy very well. We return to the girl who was with the protagonist in the forest, clearly shocked. In her thoughts, she wonders how it's even possible for the guy to have cleared the tutorial tower in 5 days. A message appears saying that the status analysis and skill compatibility process is beginning. But suddenly, another message pops up saying the process failed, and that the portal is opening. Suwoo gets ready to leave while the girl stays behind, still in disbelief. Realizing he's about to leave her, she shouts for them to go together, but the protagonist can only think that he's finally in Seoul. On the other side of the portal, a man speaks with the pair. A buff guy asks what all the commotion is about, and a younger man behind him says the portal opened, but something seems off. Rolling his eyes, the muscular man says he remembers seeing the short-haired girl on the entry list. And approaching, he asks what's going on. The young man who was speaking with the duo then says the guy who came out of the portal wasn't listed on the entry list. Thinking to himself, the leader of Team 2 wonders how the guy cleared the tower and came out without a scratch despite being scrawny. Shoving the man in the tie aside, the buff guy says he'll handle the situation, then asks who the protagonist is and why he's not on the list. Suwoo replies that it's because he didn't enter through the portal. Yelling, the buff man asks how he came out of the entrance without going in through it. Our boy simply says that's just how it happened. Annoyed, the Team 2 leader says someone clearly has no respect for their superiors, and placing his hand on the hunter's head, says he knows the guy awakened some stealth skill and is just messing around, but he better stop if he doesn't want to die. Getting no answer, he asks if the guy wants to have his face ripped off right there. Laughing, Suwoo tells the man to shut his mouth and stop blowing that breath in his face, then says that since he mentioned ripping his face off, he should stop talking and come at him as long as he breathes as little as possible so his bad breath doesn't reach him. Hearing that enrages the Team 2 leader. Cursing at the protagonist, he gets ready to throw a punch. Still smiling, our boy says he already told the man to shut up, then asks if he's deaf or something. Sometime later, we see Sejun and the girl beside him completely speechless, because both the muscular guy and his team are on the ground after getting completely beaten up. The guy in the tie appears and says that the person he reported earlier got into a fight with the security team and then vanished. Turning around, the guild leader asks if there's any footage from the security cameras that captured the culprit. Quickly, the young man shows footage of the exact moment the commotion started. He says that in just a few seconds, the guy took down 5 hunters and vanished, probably using some kind of stealth ability. Disagreeing, the guild master says that actually the young man moves incredibly fast, while thinking to himself that this person really is Suwoo, who apparently hasn't changed at all in 10 years. After a few minutes of silence, Sejun asks for a wanted notice to be issued and says that once they find the young man, they should just say his name and bring him to him. Everyone sets off to begin the search, while the guild master wonders what the hell happened to the boy during all that time and where he might be headed now that he's back. Suddenly, he spots the huntress who exited the portal with the protagonist. Nervously, the young woman says she didn't do anything inside the tower because the mysterious guy handled everything. Smiling, Sejun says that since she came out faster than expected, she must have earned some decent skills. A bit shy, the girl says she received an A-rank ability. Without wasting time, the man asks why she doesn't just stay and sign a contract with the Empire Guild. Hearing this makes the girl explode with joy. She says that doing so would be an honor for her family. Suddenly, someone shows up and says the guild might be called Empire, but they act like bandits. Turning around, the team leader asks the person to watch what they say. Smiling, Ryujiwan, S-rank hunter of the Jomang Guild, says he didn't mean to offend, and that the young man is very meticulous. Koi Sumil, S-rank hunter from the White Lion Guild, says that apparently everyone came after being contacted by the association, then asks if those men on the ground were wiped out by the unregistered awakened. Seeing the state of the security team leader, the gray-haired hunter says that whoever did this is clearly a troublemaker. Agreeing, Choi says they need to find the boy quickly, as he might possess a high-level ability, making him a potential elite talent. Ryu suggests that whoever finds the boy first should have the right to claim him, regardless of what shady methods they use. Suspicious, Sejun just stares at the hunter. Koi says that in that case, each of them will search on their own while keeping the others informed. Walking away, the gray-haired hunter says he'll make a call once he finds the boy. Annoyed, the Empire Guild master says as if that's ever going to happen. Leaving the Empire Guild headquarters, Ryu tells Jinsik to gather all the C and D rank hunters from Jomgang to form search teams. Curious, the blue-haired young man asks who the hunter wants to find. Turning with a smile, he says it's Min Sejun's younger brother. Elsewhere, Frey asks Suwoo why the first place he goes after returning to Earth is a shop that only sells fried chicken. But after trying a piece, the mysterious being asks if that's the legendary golden fried bird and begs to eat more. After devouring it happily, he asks the protagonist where they're going now. Our boy says there's only one place to go, his home. After a few hours, he arrives at a small, simple-looking house and quickly enters through the wooden gate. He remembers how he used to be warmly welcomed there by his father, who always complained that he was late, and by his mother, who greeted him with food while asking him to call his brother. Both of them would come running excited for dinner, but now his home is a mess, full of cobwebs and scattered bottles. That sight does nothing to lift the protagonist's mood. In silence, he sits on the porch, thinking about how he still can't remember his parents' faces and how for some people, forgetting is a gift from God. But for him, it was a curse. We learn that after 100 years in the demon realm, with his human senses weakening and his body trapped in time, Su felt like he would be erased by the curse of forgetting. That's why he clung desperately to his memories of his younger brother and his disciples, so that his life wouldn't become just a distant memory. And that's what kept him alive for a century. Free says the boy's house feels lonely, and that the place they lived in the demon realm was cozier. Getting up, our boy says there's no fried chicken in the other world, instantly ending the creature's argument. The protagonist then says that either way, he only stopped by to take a look. Then asks if now's the time to start looking for the kids to see if they're all doing well after 10 years, including Sejun. Suddenly, someone yells. We see that Su is surrounded by hunters. Ambion introduces himself as a C-rank hunter from the Jomang Guild and asks if the guy knows how long they've been looking for him. Staring at him, the protagonist asks if he's expecting a pat on the back. The hunter repeats the name of the guild he belongs to, but our boy says he only cares about what he wants. Annoyed, Ambion asks if he's going to have to make him crawl over to him. Smirking, Suwu says that actually suits him, then states that apparently even gorillas are becoming hunters these days. Activating his power, the red-haired man tells his team they'd better teach the guy a lesson before bringing him in. He quickly charges in and lands a solid hit. The punch sends our boy flying until his body crashes hard into a wall. Laughing, Ambion asks who the kid was calling a gorilla. Everyone starts laughing and says the guy passed out before even pulling his hand out of his pocket. Looking at the information on the attacker's lightning ability, Su asks Frey if he wants to eat that. Frey says it's the first ability he's seen since arriving on Earth, but he'd love to try it. Standing up, our boy says it's fine. Noticing how fast the guy is suddenly moving past him, the red-haired hunter asks what's going on, but gets slammed with a heavy hit before getting an answer. His face is smashed into the ground, leaving the rest of the guild members stunned. Without hesitation, the protagonist releases Frey, causing a strange symbol to appear on the ground. Once the process is complete, we find out the skill extraction was successful. Frey says that wasn't bad at all, even if it tasted worse than chicken. One of the guild members starts grinding his teeth, clearly furious, then orders the others to attack Sawu. Our boy realizes this is the perfect moment to test the ability he just extracted. As he activates it, Frey says he gets the idea. Multiple rapid strikes are unleashed in succession, making one of the guild guys realize he's completely screwed before even finishing his attack. As expected, the protagonist lands a kick that makes the guy cough up strawberry juice. We find out Suwu used a skill called Vital Point Strike, which works even better with a weapon. And after picking up a knife from the guy he just dropped, he says that even though the blade is dull, he'll give it a test. Suddenly, someone calls out to our boy. He pauses mid-strike to see who's interrupting him. To his surprise, he finds himself face-to-face with none other than his younger brother, who starts smiling with tears in his eyes, while the protagonist stands there in disbelief, still holding the knife. We learn that 20 years ago, gates opened to a peaceful land, and the world was thrown into chaos. Monsters began appearing everywhere, along with first-generation awakened individuals possessing unimaginable powers. Since there were no laws in place to handle the situation, barbarism ruled for a long time. And because of that chaos, Su and Sejun lost their parents and had to survive on their own, to the point that the protagonist had to drop out of school to become a hunter, since he was a first-generation awakened. We see young Sejun asking if his brother isn't going to school. He replies no, he has to work. Lowering his head, the little boy asks if it's all his fault. But our boy says he's just really bad at studying, so he chose his career early. Worried, the boy with glasses asks when he'll be back. Smiling, the protagonist simply says he'll return soon. Back to the present, Su is amazed at how beautiful his younger brother's house is. Taking the chance to touch everything at the door, the boy with glasses says he earned money using the skills he learned from him, then reveals that he bought that house so they could live together, and that there's a reserved space inside. Happy, the protagonist as he can finally raise his little brother, who worked so hard all this time. Saijun says it was the protagonist who did all the hard work, and now he's sure it really is his brother. Getting straight to the point, he asks where the protagonist has been during these 10 years. Our boy then tells the young man to take a seat, because he has 100 years of story to tell. After getting cozy and eating, the younger brother says that, to summarize, 10 years ago, the guy defeated the 4th demon lord and was transported to another dimension by an artifact the creature possessed. So for 100 years, he grew stronger with that ability and searched for dragons with dimensional magic until he reached the Dragon King, who, after being defeated, released the dimensional orb that allowed him to return to Earth. Confirming that's exactly what happened, Suwu says the predator came with him too and is now inside his body. Shocked, Sejun asks if that's some kind of possession, but our boy says Frey is more like a parasite, and that even if it all sounds ridiculous, young man shouldn't think he's gone insane. The guy with glasses says he believes him given the world they live in, and that it's enough just to have his brother back. Looking at information about Dasu, Suwu says it's now his brother's turn to explain what happened in the country during the past 10 years that allowed a guy like that to become president. Saijun says the man took credit for defeating the fourth Demon King, so he received the title of the greatest first-generation hunter, which allowed him to reach the presidency. Frustrated, the guy with glasses says he can't even imagine what Daesu will do when he finds out his brother is back. Our boy asks if the guys who attacked him earlier are the president's lackeys, but his younger brother shakes his head and says there are 7 representative guilds in South Korea, collectively known as the Heptagram. Those being the Empire Guild, the Infinity Guild, the Jomgang Guild, the White Lion Guild, the Warrior Fighter Guild, the Blue Flower Guild, and the Frozen Soul Guild. And that the ones who attacked him were from the Jomgang Guild, led by the Hunter Ryu, someone he'll deal with later. The protagonist then asks about his disciples. Nervously, Saejun says he hasn't spoken to them in a while, and all he knows is that Shilong went back home, while Kang Yehovah is now under Choi Dae-soo's control. A bit surprised, Soo asks about Minjun, only to find out that he died. In disbelief, our boy demands to know who was responsible. The guy with glasses says the boy's body disappeared, so they never found the culprit. But the only ones capable of killing a hunter are other hunters or unregistered awakened individuals. The problem is, even the HMCS couldn't find any clues. Confused, the protagonist asks what HMCS is. Pulling out his laptop, Saejun says it's a special investigation unit that operates on the front lines of crimes against hunters, with the authority to investigate and arrest all awakened criminals. Our boy asks if his brother has any connections inside the organization. He says yes, but it would be better for him not to get involved in dangerous stuff and just use their guild's intel team instead. After thinking for a bit, the protagonist says he doesn't just need information. Concerned, the guy with glasses says the organization deals with all kinds of criminals, and it's way too soon to go there. Determined, Soo says he spent 100 years fighting in another world, which means he's seen and done all sorts of things. Swallowing hard, the Empire Guild leader says he forgot what his brother's nickname used to be, then says he'll contact Y Yeji from the Frozen Soul Guild to arrange a meeting. Thinking to himself, he wonders what exactly happened to Soo in that other world. Suddenly, Soo calls out and says he recognizes the face on the screen. Getting closer, Saejun says that's the team leader from the Gangbuk district, Jonggu, and asks how the boy knows the man. 2 days later, at HMCS headquarters, a man yells that, in any case, those 2 guys are from the second generation. A young man asks what happened, and the Gangbuk team leader says a rookie was just added to his team. The young man is left speechless, while the older man complains that things were different back in his day, and for the 10th time tells the story of how he was a rookie and took a fatal hit, just when the group was on the verge of losing a lot of power. But a healer with incredible abilities appeared, and saved him. Suddenly, Soo bursts into the room with a kick to the door, startling both the man and the young guy, then asks why he changed his name if it only confuses people. Without waiting for an answer, the protagonist asks if the man remembers the person who saved him once, leaving the team leader absolutely speechless. Sometime later, we see the man introducing the protagonist to the rest of the team. He then says that since the guy is new there, he may need information, which should be given to him immediately, and that he must be treated with the utmost respect. A green-haired girl says it's kind of contradictory for Jongwoo to be acting that way, but the guy next to her tells her to shut up. Suddenly, the brown-haired man calls for Kim Sung, who jumps in surprise. The leader then says it's time to introduce the new recruit to the others, while some of the younger members wonder if Soo is a 3-star hunter. Inside the room, Jongwoo asks if our boy would like some coffee. He says yes. A bit nervous, Kim, who is the data manager of the Gangbuk team, asks what exactly she's supposed to tell the new recruit. The protagonist says he'd like to see the records of all hunters who were killed over the past 20 years. Kim tries to say that the request is unfeasible due to the amount of data, but the team leader cuts her off, saying she should stop making excuses and handle the task. With no choice, the data manager asks if he's only referring to humans. Drinking his coffee, the protagonist says that officially recognized murder cases by the HMCS are valid too, also including a list of hunter killers. Thinking aloud, he says killing an awakened is nearly impossible, unless the attacker has equal strength. And since Minjun was high level, it means his killer was a professional. Kim asks where she should send the requested information, and the protagonist tells her to just send it to his phone for now. Suddenly, a young man enters the room and informs Jonggu that a territorial war has broken out between gangs that also have awakened members. So the police have asked for help. The man asks why the officers can't handle a handful of leak awakened, but the young man says one of them is Cerberus. Curious, Soo asks who that is. The manager explains that Cerberus is on a completely different level from other guilds and is accused of being involved in hunter trafficking. Interested, our boy asks Jonggu, formerly Bangu, to take him along. Putting on his uniform, the man says that even if he changed his name, if the boy prefers Byunggu, then that's his name again. He then states that the kid should at least get some training first, since he's still a rookie. Meanwhile, at the scene of the conflict, someone says the field captain of Bloodless Reaper isn't that impressive. It's Kang Ho, vice leader of Cerberus. Next to him, a young man says the man is absolutely right. Jekin, third in command of the gang, says that's kind of unfair to say considering half of the opposition got wrecked by his cleaver. Laughing, the man tells him that if he feels left out, he should focus on beating him. Jekin says he'll do that someday. Kang then says it's a good thing he quit being a hunter, otherwise they'd all be in trouble. He then declares that from this day forward, that place belongs to Cerberus. But suddenly, a huge explosion erupts. On the ground, Jikin yells, asking if anyone from the gang they defeated is still alive. Wearing his HMCS uniform, Suwoo tries to remember the name of the other group. Furious, the red-haired guy asks if his brother killed someone from the organization, but Suwoo says that doesn't matter now. Our boy appears and says that judging by how Kang was talking, he must have killed some hunters. So he'd like to see more what he can do. Injured, the Cerberus members say they've never seen the boy in Gangbuk before and ask what they should do now. Nervous, the vice leader says that if the intruder asks to see something, then they'd better show it. He activates his full-body armor ability and orders everyone to attack. Suddenly, Kang is transported to another place, where someone appears to be on the other side of the river. Looking closer, he realizes it's his grandfather and asks if he's calling him over or telling him to leave. We see that it's all just an illusion, and that the Cerberus leader is actually on the ground. A hand grabs his hair and tells him to wake up. Crouched, Suwoo says he's the only one left. He then asks Frey to feed. Excited, the parasite says he can't wait to taste that ability. Badly beaten, Kang asks why the guy is there and says that no matter what he wants to know, they've never killed a hunter. Smiling, the protagonist says he knows that weaklings like them wouldn't be capable of something like that. The young man then asks why all of this happened. Explaining, our boy says he wanted to see how strong awakened criminals are nowadays and took the chance to stop them. Jonggu shows up and asks if Suwoo is okay, saying he was worried when the boy insisted on going alone, but now sees that was unnecessary. The protagonist says he figured they'd need at least one leader alive, so he spared Kang and killed the rest. The team leader says the priority was capturing them, but if they attacked first, then it's fine. That's why they usually use body cams. In his thoughts, the man wonders if it was truly necessary. Our boy says he forgot about the camera since he's still new, then asks if the man will cover for him. Without much of a choice, he says yes. Suwoo starts walking out and casually comments that, in any case, he was hit first. Lying, Jonggu says he believes him. Neither of them notices that one member of the group besides Kang actually escaped. The guy quickly calls someone and explains what happened. When he hears that Jikin is dead, Gert, an A-rank hunter from the Red Guild Hong Kong, asks the caller to repeat the last part. Next, we see him leaving the airport with two other men after being informed that the target entered the country. Junyoung from Korea's Hunter Association approaches and offers his condolences for Jikin's death. Gert asks where his brother is. The man with glasses says he's at the Hunter Forensics Department, and that once the body is confirmed, the hunter can head to his accommodations. Smiling, the red-haired man says that sounds suspicious, then claims he heard the one who killed his brother is affiliated with immeasurable. The security officer says he can't comment on anything related to the matter. Irritated, the A-rank hunter asks if he can leave the facility outside the designated hours. Junyoung says no, and if he does, he'll be deported and face disciplinary action among other penalties. With no real options, Gert complains about the guy saying all that and walking away, then calls out for Ryu, who promptly responds. The hunter tells Ryu, a B+ rank hunter, to track down those responsible, while thinking to himself that he's going to rip out the heart of whoever killed his brother. We return to Suwoo, who asks Sijin if all of the boy's belongings were truly taken. Confirming, the man says that after Minjun's murder, his home was completely searched, as they needed to find any mana traces from the culprit. Our boy then asks if it couldn't have just been a robbery gone wrong, since if he looks at the list of stolen items, most were valuable, and the messiness increases the odds that evidence was left behind. Which means, if erasing mana traces had been the goal, setting the place on fire and burning everything would have been the better option. Staijin asks if his brother is suggesting that someone took the opportunity to rob the house after the boy was killed. The protagonist says yes, and that apparently they'll need to dismantle a few gangs. The guy with glasses says finding anything is impossible, but our boy smiles and says they won't know that unless they try. Elsewhere, he wonders why he said that so confidently, and why there are so many thieves in such a small country, so much so that it's been a week and he's found nothing. Frey says he'll help and tells him to turn right, but Suwoo runs straight into a dead end and gets furious. Suddenly, a conversation catches his attention. As he gets closer, he hears a man talking about how HMCS has been cracking down aggressively on the gangs, since they have investigative authority over hunters worldwide. The older man beside him says they're all just government dogs, so all they have to do is kill everyone and end the nonsense, especially since any skilled hunter would rather join a guild. Concerned, the brown-haired man says that since they specialize in stolen hunter goods, maybe they should relocate the warehouse. The protagonist appears and says it's time for the place to be confiscated. The guy with huge teeth says this must be the guy causing chaos among the gangs, while the man with the mustache calls for reinforcements. Our boy says he's busy, and unless they want to die, they'd better tell him where the warehouse is. Reinforcements arrive quickly and ask what's going on. Furious, the chubby guy says the boy has no idea what he's gotten himself into, that even if he's from HMCS, they could just bury him in concrete and dump him in the ocean, and no one would ever find him. Without taking his hands out of his pockets, the protagonist says it's really thoughtful of them to gather like this just to help him out. He then tells Frey it's time to use his skill. The parasite replies that to do that, he'll need some chicken. Smiling, Sue agrees to the trade. The light radiating from our boy's body nearly blinds the criminals, who are then hit by a move called Shockwave. The attack blasts everything away, including the men. As he approaches, our boy asks if they're ready to show him the warehouse. With tears in his eyes, Hansen asks who the hell the young man is. Grinning like a maniac, the protagonist says he's just a lunatic. A few hours later, inside the warehouse, Frey says they're only there because he gave the directions. Sue responds that the parasite just got lucky as he holds the item he wanted so badly. It's Minjun's research journal, sealed with a magical lock that can't be opened unless the owner's mana is used. Frey asks how he plans to read the notebook, but the protagonist says he's only interested in the mana on the pages. Taking out his phone, he decides to call Byung-gu to report that he has a dozen awakened criminals tied up and under his custody, so the man should come by car. Since, after all this, they still need to go somewhere. It's revealed that there's a neutral battlefield zone where underground techniques and bizarre abilities are traded. This place is inside a market that sells everything related to abilities called Black Skyfall. Inside, we see a woman sitting in front of a spread of cards. Picking one up, she smiles and says that apparently an interesting guest is on the way. Walking through the city, Sue says not much has changed compared to 10 years ago. Frey comments that the boy seems to be famous since everyone is staring at him and asks if he can grab a bite. Declining, the protagonist says this is a neutral combat zone. Someone suddenly appears and says it's been a while since they've seen the young man. It's Mumyeon, a shaman and one of the 12 bosses of Black Skyfall. Smiling, the woman says she's been expecting him. Inside, she remarks that the protagonist hasn't changed at all in 10 years. Curious, he says the same about her. The shaman then asks what he's been doing for the last 10 years that kept him from reaching out. Handing over Minjun's journal, our boy says it's a long story, and rather than explaining, he'd like to know if she can extract the mana from the notebook. Moonyoung smiles and says as usual, he's still very direct. She then says she'll do as he asked. Picking up a knife from the table, Sue cuts his own hand. We learn that mana is used through skills or magic, and reverting it to its original form is nearly impossible. It's like making curry. You can remove solid ingredients like carrots and potatoes, but you can't separate curry powder from the water once it's dissolved, nor return the ingredients to their original state. But the shaman can do it using her ability called Mana Hacker, an illegal method that challenges causality and defies the laws of nature. That's why abilities like hers are often linked to criminal activity, and why society sees the woman with suspicion. Smiling, Mumyeong says it's done, and adds that Sue's strawberry juice tastes surprisingly good. Frey is horrified. The protagonist grabs the woman's wrist and, thanking her for the compliment, says it's on the house. The shaman asks if he's leaving already, but our boy says he still has things to do. With no choice, the woman says the guy is really mysterious. In the car, the parasite says he never wants to go back there again. The protagonist asks why he's being so picky. Frey says the boy and the woman are both degenerates, but Sung says he just made a small cut on his hand, then says it's time to head to the Institute of Ancient History Research. Arriving at the location, he says this is where Minjun was murdered. The parasite claims this is trespassing, but our boy says the building belongs to the Empire Guild and was purchased and preserved by Sejun, who also seems to be struggling to accept the young man's death. Placing his hand on the table, the protagonist says he needs to see the memories from that fateful day. Frey asks if he's really going to use that. Sue says he is, and then activates his ability called Mana Remembrance to experience the emotions felt by the owner of the mana in a specific place. Quickly, we see Minjun with a hooded man. The parasite complains about not being able to see things clearly, but our boy says that's just how it works. After all, it's only possible to experience the target's emotions. Thinking to himself, he says Minjun was never a weak hunter, which means the culprit is highly skilled. Near the image of the young man, Sue tries to understand what could have happened. He asks if it was the work of an order. Suddenly, the hooded man gets closer and asks Minjun to speak louder. Thinking to himself, our boy wonders if his disciple was also part of some organization. Frey asks if he's okay. Ever since arriving in the demon realm, he constantly spoke about Sejun and the disciples he had, even looking for them the moment he stepped back onto Earth. And now he just saw Minjun die before his own eyes. Confused, Sue asks where Frey learned so many words. Without answering, the parasite says he can feel Sue's emotions surging violently to the point of nausea. The protagonist says he's fine and that after 100 years he was bound to break eventually. Suddenly, Yampang appears and asks if he's Sue, then states that the fact the boy wandered around all day made everything very difficult as someone is dying to see him. Crossing his arms, our boy says that apparently there are 6 little rats who want to see him. Narrowing his eyes, the hunter says he'll give the boy 2 choices. The first is to let them tie him up and take him, or the second, resist and be attacked. Choosing the first, Sue says it's better than being attacked. Ryu asks another group member to tie the boy up, but when the young man approaches, he ends up receiving a fatal blow. Smiling, the protagonist says he actually prefers the second option. Furious, the Red Guild hunter says he'll kill him, but someone appears and tells him to stop. With hatred in his eyes, Jurt says he'll take it from here, because the prey is his. Still smiling, Sumu says this is going to be fun. Before doing anything, the guild leader asks if the protagonist is alone, and if he was really the one who killed Jakin, his brother. Scratching his neck, our boy says he's not sure. He doesn't usually ask the name of trash before cleaning it up. Hearing that makes the red-haired man even angrier, to the point he charges straight into the attack, declaring that he'll make the boy regret being born. Rushing, Jurt strikes the first blow, but it's blocked by Suwu, who asks if he's an A rank. The hunter realizes the young man is a healer and attacking again says he's nothing but an arrogant brat. Seeing the man blocked again, the other hunters decide to join the fight, but the protagonist suddenly appears in front of them and says he can't let them interfere. Using his lightning ability, he takes the guys down all at once, and excited says it's been a while since things were this interesting. Everyone starts wondering who the boy is while Gert thinks about how he analyzed his movements. After all, none of the speed-type hunters he met in the portal showed that level of precision, which means he'll have to go all out right away. Grabbing one of the guild members by the neck, Suwu says that if a crime is committed by someone's brother or son, that person must face the punishment, but they prefer to feel wronged even while being criminals. Furious, Jurt asks if he's saying that all criminals deserve to die, then declares that his brother had no choice but to become a criminal to feed him. So the only sinner there is himself, and he must pay with his own life. Screaming, the hunter attacks with his heavenly attack with wolf fangs. Calmly, Suwu says he won't be able to dodge the strike with a single movement and asks Free to activate an ability. The parasite says he's exhausted, but our boy tells him to activate it one last time. Free agrees, and quickly the protagonist manages to use the neutralize ability, which nullifies the opponent's attributes. Gert realizes what's happening and is left speechless. Shocked, Yampang wonders how the boy has such a high-level ability capable of nullifying a hunter's skill. About to attack, the protagonist asks the red-haired man what would happen if everyone facing hardship decided to become a criminal, then states that he's clearly outdated. With the blow, Gert is sent flying but manages to stay on his feet. The other members get worried, but the hunter orders everyone to stay out of the fight. In launching another attack, he thinks to himself that he will win through close combat. Since the boy will eventually run out of mana, Suwu quickly jumps to protect himself. Grabbing Gert by the hair, he says the man better not even think about doing that. Punching the hunter in several spots, he asks if the man will take responsibility if the building collapses. Since he prefers to keep using abilities without caring, the red-haired guy continues the attack. Our boy is sent flying as Gert tells Ryu to tie him up. Activating his ability, the guild member says he's confused since the man keeps changing his mind about whether he wants help. Chains appear around the protagonist's body, charging him with full fury. Gert says he'll blow Suwu up so badly he won't be able to heal. Removing the chains, our boy says congratulations for following in his brother's footsteps. He then attacks with an ability called Life Drain, which absorbs the target's life force. In the blink of an eye, the Red Guild leader looks cadaverous. Shaking all over, Yampang asks if that's really a healer's ability. Suwu then questions how he could call his first ability that thing and says that, to begin with, he was never a typical healer, because instead of using mana to restore life force, he always preferred to control his own life energy through a process called Life Spirit Sorcery. Approaching the braided hunter, he says it's his turn now. Scared, Yampang says he surrenders. Our boy tells him to shut his mouth, and sometime later wonders if he cleaned up everything. He then remembers his body cam, which this time was clipped to his belt. Looking at the device, he asks Bemu if everything was recorded and says that since he was attacked once again, everything that happened was legitimate self-defense. Completely in shock after watching everything on the computer, the team leader says everything looks fine. The only problem is that the boy hit the live button instead of the record button. Elsewhere, someone says the situation has become complicated for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and asks when the HMCS started live streaming the annihilation of awakened criminals. A man says the feature has existed for 2 years with the goal of creating promotional videos for HMCS. However, the project failed since the organization couldn't produce high-quality footage. Intrigued, the man with glasses asks why someone so talented would join HMCS. But a woman says the current issue is that the person killed in the video was a guest hunter from the Red Guild. Suddenly, someone arrives and apologizes for keeping everyone waiting. It's Choi Dae-soo, the president of Korea, who then asks what the problem is. A few days later, in the Empire Guild's cafeteria, Saijin asks if Soo is listening to what he's saying. The boy tries to mention the live stream and repeats the question. Our boy says no, he's eating. Then says yes, he's listening. Without letting his brother talk, he asks if he can eat there every day. Saijin says yes and goes back to talking about the live stream, which is the topic of the moment. Saijin says that luckily it was a body cam with low-quality footage, so the protagonist's face wasn't clearly visible. But if Dae-soo finds out he's back, there's no telling what he'll do, which means it's better for the boy to stay low-key. Eating another pastry, Soo agrees and says he'll do it for him as long as the conversation ends and they eat. After getting fed, the glasses-wearing youth says he's not a kid anymore, but our boy says he'll always be a brat. Other hunters approach the two, and one of them is the girl who was inside the tower with the protagonist. Saijun introduces Shin Ji-soo to his brother and says she recently joined the Empire Guild, then asks if everyone is gathered because of the joint seminar for new guild hunters. Smiling, Seok confirms and introduces Chu Ha-min from the White Lion Guild, and Yamato, a hunter from the Frozen Soul Guild. The young man turns to Suwoo and says he's heard a lot about him, but is only now getting the chance to introduce himself. He then says he's looking forward to working with the protagonist. Smiling, our boy says he's looking forward to working with him too. Butting into the conversation, Chu asks if that's the rookie who stirred up trouble, and says he saw the video of the guy killing Gert, who was kind of his rival, but that he doesn't seem to be the same person from the video. Seok and Shin are shocked by the guy's audacity. Nervously, Saijun says the hunter is being extremely rude to someone he's just meeting for the first time. Mocking, the guy says he only asked a question and that, as always, the Empire Guild is too uptight. Shouting, the boy with glasses says that actually it's the White Lion Guild that should be ashamed for having such a rude member, and that he's dying to know what Sungil will say about the situation. Chu says that as a direct disciple of Xiaolong, the leader of the Blackwater Lotus would never be intimidated by a threat like that. Eating, Suwoo watches everything silently, because the guy just mentioned the name of one of his disciples. But seeing that things are about to get ugly, he decides to stand up and intervene. He then says that if the guy wants to check if he's really the one from the video, he can go ahead and try, since he's dying to see how well his master trained him. Furious, Chu wonders how the boy dares speak of Xiaolong. However, since they're in the Empire Guild's headquarters, he decides not to do anything. After kicking a chair, he turns around and tells the protagonist to watch his back at night. Seok apologizes for the whole situation, but Saijun says it's fine and tells him to leave. Turning to the front, he tells our boy that he'll take care of the situation later. Sumu says it's not a problem. After all, the young man is the disciple of one of his own disciples. Elsewhere, someone says Sungil can consider the matter resolved. Drinking his tea, the man says the issue could have been handled with documents, but since he came in person, it's an honor to receive him. The leader of the White Lion Guild says he came because he also needed to apologize for the disrespect shown by one of his guild members toward a rookie from HMCS. Smiling, John Ho, director of HMCS, says there's no need for someone of his status to apologize personally, and that he knows he's trying to assess the situation. However, the person he wants to see is currently busy with a task at the prison, selecting awakened criminals. Feigning disappointment, the White Lion leader says he's sorry to hear that and asks if that type of request is rare. The director says it's rare but not unheard of before. Such requests were usually handled by large guilds. But apparently things have changed recently. Standing up, Sungil asks if the man would allow Chu to apologize to the boy in person if he can't manage to do it himself. Jian says yes, after all, the issue was between the two of them. He then wishes the man with glasses a good trip. Leaving the room, the White Lion Guild leader thinks to himself that he won't give up so easily on someone of that caliber. Turning around, he asks his secretary to notify Hunter Chu that he should get ready for a trip. The woman says she understands and asks where she should send him. We're taken to Inshin, where a guard wonders why the MCS team hasn't arrived yet. Another guard says the team should be here soon. Curious, the chubby one asks what all the fuss is about. He then says the inspection season is always exhausting and that everything would be easier if the criminals just behaved. Looking at Xera's Volk's file, he says the man suddenly started a rebellion like he'd lost his mind. The younger guard says the criminal was pretty famous in the underworld and that it was tough for the agencies to capture him. We find out the man is about to be transferred to Gangwon. Inside the cell, a rat starts talking to Volk, saying the organization has already made its move, and if he wants to get out of there, he needs to cause some kind of trouble inside the prison. Standing outside, someone wonders if that's really the awakened prison in Inshin. Sometime later, the guard informs Chu that the protagonist just left. Irritated, the guy wonders why prisoner transport has to be so fast, then realizes the bus was actually right behind him, but now it's too late. Getting into the car, he says that apparently he has no choice but to go to Gangwon, and that he hopes to get paid with overtime included. Inside the bus, Sue enjoys an iced coffee. Suddenly, Volk calls his attention and says watching him drink everything alone is hurting his feelings. Our boy doesn't care. The man then asks if he's the warden of the prison he's being transferred to. Bluntly, the protagonist says no. Volk then says that, judging by how comfortable the boy seems beside him, he must be confident in his abilities. Stu turns to him and asks who he is. The prisoner chuckles and says he really is insane, then asks if the boy even knows the reason for his transfer. Our boy asks if he's being transferred because he talks too much. Showing his cuffs, Volk says that he's only wearing them because he turned 5 awakened criminals into meat paste. So the boy should really be asking why in a ++ level awakened criminal is being transferred in a standard transport vehicle, alongside an arrogant rookie. Finishing his little speech, the prisoner says he can at least tell him one thing: he's screwed. Suddenly, something causes an explosion and hurls the bus violently into the air. Outside, an old man who looks like a monk and a boy ask whether Volk is dead. Suddenly, the man kicks the door open and steps out of the vehicle. Furious, he asks if the old man was planning to send him to the afterlife as well. Mocking him, the old man says that if the Grey Wolf of Bestia dies from a little accident like that, then he's become a lapdog, then asks if he dealt with the escort. He says he kicked the hunter in the temple and the vehicle exploded. So yes, you could say he did. Impatient, Volk asks if the purple-haired boy could take off his cuffs a little faster, but the boy says only if he wants to lose his wrists. After a few minutes, the chain snaps in half. The prisoner then says he thought he was going to die of boredom. Snapping back, the boy says it's only been a few months since he was imprisoned. Suddenly, someone orders the trio to freeze. It's Chu, who says he was wondering why Volk chose such a dark, secluded road. He then claims that Sumu can't be anything special if he got taken down by people like them. Getting ready to attack, the guy asks which organization they belong to, unless of course they prefer a beating first. The purple-haired boy says he knows the hunter and asks when he started following them. The old man notes that Chu is alone, which gets Volk excited. Annoyed, the brown-haired guy tells them to stop whispering and just say who they are. The prisoner asks if he really needs to know, since he's going to die anyway. In the blink of an eye, Ceres takes on his wolf form. Nervously, Chu thinks to himself that he needs to defeat the man to force him back to normal. He then activates his ability called Azura Diamond Rage, which covers his entire body in armor. The two charge into battle without hesitation. Defending against the blows, Volk realizes that fighting the guy alone would have been a problem. While Chu thinks he can feel that he's causing damage, but for some reason, his opponent is still standing. The criminal asks if this is some kind of welcome massage service. Watching the fight, the old man says they don't have time to waste and asks the boy to finish it. Obeying, the young man activates his 10-headed viper ability, causing snakes to appear and attempt to restrain Chu, who starts running. Unsuccessfully, he ends up captured. Volk then says the White Lion Guild folks really aren't anything special. After taking a punch, the hunter crashes to the ground while the criminal says that in the back alleys, he's just another loser. Looking up, the brown-haired boy says Volk is getting cocky for someone who needs help to fight one person. The wolf kicks the hunter and tells him to just wait quietly for backup. Suddenly, the old man tells Volk to finish the job. Preparing to strike the fatal blow, the criminal asks if Chu would like to say any last words, though he won't be listening. Thinking, the hunter says it's unbelievable that this is how it ends for him. But luckily, a bright yellow light appears, forcing everyone to leap away for safety. Still tied up, Chu ends up getting hit. Su then asks if it was Xiaolong who taught him to give up in front of the enemy. Shocked, the hunter asks how he's even still alive. Activating the camera, the protagonist asks which button he's supposed to press to record. Volk says that's impossible since he crushed the guy's skull before leaving. Also surprised, the old man says the kid was dead and that the boy doesn't have an ordinary ability. Furious, Chu tells the protagonist to wait for backup. After listing all the crimes the trio committed, including disturbing his sacred coffee time, Siwoo says that by the authority of HMCS, the 3 people present are considered criminals and therefore will pay here and now for their crimes. Still with his back turned, Siwoo tells Chu to stay down and just watch. After all, Ashura isn't a skill made only for striking. Charging forward, Volk asks what the hell the protagonist is talking about. But as he gets closer, he receives a punch right in the face instead of an answer. Sending the enemy flying, our boy says that this is a technique designed for piercing. Mouth agape, the White Lion Guild hunter wonders how the boy knows a technique created by Xiaolong. Explaining further, Siwoo says you need to drain the strawberry juice first to properly tenderize the meat. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurs, caused by the monk-like old man who used his ability called Maharaga. The problem is, our boy managed to dodge it. Showing little reaction, the protagonist says the man truly didn't waste his years of life. Frey asks if he can eat that ability, but Simu says it would be way too costly. Still in shock, Chu asks who the hell our boy is and how he knows his master's technique. Suddenly, the old man activates another ability and tells the protagonist not to move recklessly, unless he wants to see his hunter colleague get crushed. Smiling, Sue asks if, while he was busy beating the life out of Volk, the man was planning something behind his back. The monk says it's not a threat, just an agreement, so if the boy releases the wolf, he'll release the hunter as well, and everyone can walk away in silence. Cleaning out his ear, the protagonist says that if he weren't searching for something, he wouldn't have taken on that mission. Besides, Chu can take a beating. Surprised, the old man asks what he means. They're not on the same side. Answering, the protagonist says the only allies here are him and Volk. Getting straight to the point, our boy says he knows the two of them are hunter-killers, who likely work for a large organization given the cursed tools they carry. Preparing to attack, the bald man asks why he came alone if he already knew all this. With a dark look, Suwu says he's here to find out who they work for. Frightened, the old man tells him not to take another step. Unbothered, the protagonist activates his shockwave ability, which ends up overloading the old man's cursed tool. Backing away, thinks that should be impossible with a normal human's mana density. Thinking to himself, Suwu says he's already 40% restored, which means proper warm-ups are having a bigger effect than he expected. Growing impatient, he tells the old man to stop wasting time. He doesn't have many years left anyway. Showing he won't give up, the man asks if the boy really thinks he'll make them talk so easily, even knowing that anyone affiliated with an organization signs a silence pact, which is sealed with the signer's mana. Volk finally regains consciousness, and the old man asks if he's recovered his strength. Smiling, the protagonist asks if this is all because they're afraid of dying. Then says if that's the case, they don't need to worry, just die a few more times and they'll get used to it. Realizing things are about to get ugly, the bald man screams at Volk to do something, furious. He says he gets it, and charging in, declares that even if it kills him, he'll destroy the boy. Suddenly, Chu appears and says that no, he won't. Wiping his mouth, the hunter says that now they'll finally fight on equal footing. Volk says he should have stayed down instead of getting involved, but Chu says that this is where the fun begins. Su activates his ability called 1,000 Winds, causing tornadoes of light to appear and swirl around the enemies, lifting them off their feet. Grabbing the old man by the neck, our boy asks what it feels like to be on the brink of death. Unable to break free, the monk just makes strange noises. Su then asks how long it'll take until he's ready to answer his questions. With drool dripping from his mouth, the old man asks what the boy is. The protagonist says that apparently once isn't enough, while Chu thinks the whole thing is insane, because the boy is slowly healing the enemy before he dies with a ridiculously overpowered healing ability. Arms crossed, our boy asks for the third time who the man works for. Exhausted, Volk begs the old man to just tell him. He finally says the name, Bestia. Hearing that makes the protagonist excited. Injured, the monk thinks that before he had his doubts, but now that he's seen the boy's abilities, he's sure that the kid is one of the 3 long-lost legends known as Mad Dog. Approaching, our boy says that now that their mounts are working, it's time for a little chat, because he needs to know who the snake-like member is. We learn that there's a group of elite hunter-killers, whose leader is named Crow. In that world, they have significant influence both in skill and in the number of contracts. That's why the old man, a first-generation hunter who had stayed hidden in the shadows, had no reason to refuse the organization's invitation. But for assassins within the group, secrecy about fellow members is a fundamental rule, which means that until their heads roll, loyalty is the organization's highest commandment. In his thoughts, the bald man says that in all 15 years as a member, he never imagined he would betray the group. But after experiencing true death multiple times, his lips began moving on their own. Out loud, he says that the person in the image is a member of Bestia, named Black Mamba. Our boy finds the name interesting, then says he has one more question, because he needs to know if the duo was involved in the assassination order for Hunter Minjin. Volk simply lowers his head as if confirming. Trembling, he thinks about how awful the sensation is. The old man then says that even though they are part of the organization, they are still independent members. They don't know each other's identities or whereabouts, but there's a reason he was sent to retrieve Volk. It's the biannual organizational meeting happening in a week, and the order wants the man to attend. But if Su wants, they can tell him where it'll take place and even help him, because now they want to become his subordinates. Surprised, Shu asks what the hell is going on, and calling the protagonist brother says he can't seriously be considering that offer. Our boy says he's not his brother, but the hunter says that since he used Azura, he must be related to Xeolong, or maybe even his master's master, so he should accept him as a disciple instead of those two. Stewie tells him to shut up while thinking that all he wants are the details on Black Mamba. However, if his plan leaks to the organization through the duo, things could turn ugly. So our boy concludes that he'll accept the criminals as his subordinates, leaving Shu in shock. Happy, the old man says both of them will be loyal and never get in the boy's way. The protagonist says there's one condition. He needs to be sure he won't be betrayed again, so the two of them must take a mana oath. Outraged, Volk says that contract seals a person's mana core if broken. It's basically a dog collar. The old man tells him to shut up. Activating his power, our boy tells them to gather mana in their cores and speak their names out loud. With no other option, the pair obeys. Excited, Frey says he now has 2 underlings too. Our boy says their reward for loyalty is protection, so as long as they honor the oath, their lives will be spared. Kneeling, the 2 men say they understand. Throwing a tantrum, Shu says that if the boy won't accept him as a disciple, he'll report all of this to the association. Stewie just stares at him with his red eyes, and the hunter quickly says he was only joking. Putting the contract away, the protagonist asks if the meeting is really in 1 week, then says he'll accept Shu as a disciple, since he'll need help with what's coming. Hearing that makes the hunter light up with joy. As they head out, Subu thinks that the 4 of them are enough to cause a decent mess, but he'll still need one more person to clean things up. We return to the prison where Volk was held. Furious, the director says it's impossible for a prisoner like that man to have escaped, and asks why HMCS didn't handle the situation. Thinking fast, Jonggu tries to come up with a good lie. The man then asks why the transport officer didn't show up. The one in charge of the protagonist explains that transport teams usually have 4 to 5 officers, but moving Volk would have required at least 10. Yet the director only requested 1, not even counting the driver. Angry, the chubby man asks what that has to do with the fact that the prisoner escaped. Jonggu says that from what he heard, the new transport officer claimed the prisoner confessed to having high-ranking officers under his control before he escaped, and even if it's hard to believe a criminal's words, this situation needs to be investigated, so HMCS will conduct an operation both on the escaped prisoner and on the prison itself. Sometime later, our boy's friend enters the room and says that, as requested by Sue, The cleanup from the transport mission has been completed, and the bribery investigation has also begun. We see that the protagonist is accompanied by Chu, the old man known as Red Ghost, and the escaped prisoner. Panicking, the brown-haired man asks what a criminal is doing there, but Sue tells him to shut up, because now they need to plan the operation. Explaining, the protagonist says that the next day they'll infiltrate the Bestia organization's meeting, which includes about 8 high-level awakened assassins, and that the details will be provided by the defectors present. Jong-gu asks if the boy really plans to infiltrate a group of assassins with such a small team, and what the goal of the mission is. Smiling, our boy says the goal is pretty obvious: extermination. We arrive at the day of the meeting, where one of the members asks what happened to the mandatory attendance rule. Annoyed, the long-haired girl tells him that Volk and Red Ghost are missing, but the guy says he wasn't counting on them anyway. A young redhead says the two of them don't seem like the type to have the guts to betray the organization. Twirling her hair, the girl with bangs curses Volk, who promised they'd go to Earth XX together. Suddenly, a guy with a scar on his mouth tells everyone to shut up and says that how they deal with traitors is the boss's decision. Smiling, the organization's leader says she's enjoying herself and is also surprised by the disappearances, then asks if anyone else has something to say, or if it would be better to settle things with a deadly free-for-all to decide who gets to execute the traitors. All the other members remain silent, until someone turns and tells the boss to stop trying to be funny, since she's terrible at it. Black Mambay says they can schedule the executions. The problem is that the traitors know the time and place of the meetings. Mocking, another hooded figure asks if that creature really thinks those two nobodies can actually do anything. Suddenly, a voice announces that an unknown movement has been detected on routes 1 through 5. Still smiling, the leader says, "Speak of the devil," and he appears. Everyone begins preparing to contain the threat while complaining about how annoying this situation is. Sipping his tea, Mambay says they should finish this quickly so the meeting can begin. The redhead asks if he and the other girl aren't going to help. They both say no because they don't like dealing with insignificant beings. Inside the ventilation system, Jong-gu watches as the leader says they should have asked to bring the intruders' heads for identification. Thinking, he says he's never even won a lottery ticket and wonders why he's suddenly so lucky. We go back 30 minutes earlier when Sue's team arrived at the meeting location. Red Ghost explains that there are 5 entrances, each equipped with an intruder detection sensor. They're also the only way in or out, and all paths lead to the main meeting hall. After thinking for a moment, the protagonist says that means they need one person at each entrance to prevent the group from escaping. Turning around, he asks if Jong-gu brought the radios. He quickly says yes. Our boy then says each person should go through a separate passage, and if they run into someone too strong, just call him on the radio, especially if that someone is Black Mambay. After entering, the HMCS team leader says that part went smoothly, but after his entrance, the path got blocked, which forced him to find the nearest air duct. That way, without fighting even once, he ended up arriving first at the central meeting hall, where all the seemingly high-level members are. Sweating bullets, the man concludes that since 5 members left, fights must be happening everywhere. So instead of calling the team, it'd be better if he just starts the battle. Suddenly, Hedgehog finds a small ball inside the meeting hall and moves in to pick up the item. But, unfortunately for him, a massive explosion goes off. Without getting up, Crow says the girl is dead, while Mambay says that apparently a little rat managed to sneak in. Suddenly, a grenade also drops from the ceiling. But Black manages to throw the object far away, stating that he doesn't enjoy playing hide-and-seek. With the impact of the explosion, Jong-gu ends up falling from the air duct. He tries to attack before hitting the ground, defending himself. The creature quickly realizes the man is a hunter from HMCS. After landing, the team leader notes that he only managed to take down 1 member, and wonders who the hell the hooded one still sitting there is. Placing a hand on his head, Black asks if the traitors really handed him over to HMCS. Nervous, Jong-gu questions what would happen if they actually did. The creature says it would be impressed since the men chose to side with weaklings. The protagonist's team leader becomes furious and strikes a blow, sending small knives flying toward the enemy. While sipping tea, Crow says that attack wasn't half bad. With a cut on his cheek, Mambay says he had forgotten about the man's ability, which allows him to use telekinesis. Thinking to himself, Jong-gu becomes concerned about how tough his opponent's skin is. Charging forward, Black says this fight will be enough for a warm-up, then hurls the team leader against one of the walls with full force. The creature says it didn't want to leave handprints on the man's vital organs and asks Crow if it can finish the job. Grabbing the radio, the protagonist's team leader alerts the others about what happened, but suddenly he gets kicked by Black, who, without removing his foot, says the man seems to be running a bit late. Speaking the names of the traitors, the creature asks who's next. But to its surprise, the entire team appears. Without turning around, Black seems unaware he's about to be attacked from behind. Suddenly, a huge explosion occurs. Flying backward, the creature says that was quite unexpected, referring to the fact that the team handled the other members so well they managed to get there. Mambay says Crow must be pretty disappointed, and she agrees, saying she thought she had chosen useful people. The snake then says something still feels off, because judging by the wounds on the invaders' bodies, it's clear a fight took place, which means Tiger or Grizzly weren't defeated that easily. Black lands a blow, sending debris flying everywhere. Charging in, Chu says he's talking too much for a damn assassin. Manbai then asks if the guy isn't from the White Lion Guild, and throwing the hunter far away, questions what he's doing there if he's not part of HMCS. Chu crashes hard into Jonggu and apologizes. The fanged creature says that no matter how it looks at it, the situation doesn't make sense, because everyone is so uncoordinated as if they met just yesterday, meaning they're not an organization. Elsewhere, Wolverine asks who Sue is. With his back turned, our boy says he's the one who brought everyone together. Surprised, Jonggu asks how Chu got there so quickly, and he says he ran the moment he heard the call, since Sue said he'd take care of the other enemies alone. That's why they now need to keep the target inside until the boy arrives. Attacking, Volk asks if the two really think they can hold off an awakened A rank by barely trying. Red Ghost says he hasn't even used his ability yet, but something in that room feels off. Thinking, he concludes the group must have set up some sort of mechanism, since Crow is calmly observing. And since it's impossible to gauge her abilities, predicting what will happen is out of the question. Using his staff, the old man announces he'll take care of the organization's leader, while the others handle Black. Being attacked, Manbai asks if no one is going to answer his questions. Showing that they won't, Ghost says no one is leaving that room until the master arrives. He decides to use his binding formation ability, causing chains to appear around the hooded figures. Without getting up, Crow asks if this is serious. The old man then says that not even someone as highly ranked as her can escape that easily. Laughing, the leader of Bestia says the man's boss must be someone very powerful for him to be so confident. Focused on Crow, Ghost doesn't notice. The hedgehog has woken up and stood. With the attack, Volk and Jonggu run toward the bald man. The chains around Black begin to vanish, and he says, continuing, this is just a waste of time. After all, they're quite busy and don't know when reinforcements will arrive, so he's going to make sure Chu dies as fast as possible. While he speaks, Manbai activates his ability called Draconian. Jonggu says he'll cover the hunter's rear, but the latter tells him that since he's injured, he should stay put. Suddenly, Black attacks with his massive tail, forcing the men to leap for cover. Thinking to himself, Chu says the creature's mana density is extremely high, and apparently, the group is using the room as a trap, which means all he can do is buy time. Especially because the other members are also fighting and can't provide support. Black prepares to deliver a deadly punch, but suddenly, something hits his arm hard, making him pull back. We see that the knife was thrown by Jonggu. The attack enrages Manbai to the point that he roars, causing stones to start falling from the ceiling toward the team. Chu gets distracted while warning the team leader that he's about to be hit, and takes a blow that sends him flying backward. Appearing behind Bamboo, Black says that hunters who walk in the light are often deluded, since a skill's ranking, the amount of mana, or numbers don't determine victory or defeat. Then he asks if the man really thought they wouldn't prepare the place for an attack. Volk is struck directly, while Manbai reveals that the entire conference hall is equipped with self-destruction mechanisms, which means once you enter the snake's den, there's no way out alive. So the brown-haired man should stop resisting and just die quietly. Grabbing Jonggu by the neck, Black prepares to end his life. But another explosion happens and throws him backward. Running in, Sue decides to show how it's done, and lands a punch on the creature's neck. With a dark expression on his face, the protagonist says he finally found him. Giving up on killing Volk, Hedgehog charges in and asks who the boy is. Without answering, our boy attacks the girl with his shockwave ability. Still watching everything, Crow asks if the boy reverse-engineered all the magic circles set up in that space. Frey shouts that it was only possible because of him. After all, so was too slow. After getting up, the team leader says it's impressive how he turned the whole facility into paper. Getting ready to break free, Black says the boy's entrance startled him a bit, but now he finally understands that it was the boy who exterminated the other organization members and planned the entire operation. With a hand on his head, Sunwoo says the one responsible for everything is the Snake Man. Surprised, Crow asks what kind of mess Manbai got into to be hunted down. He says he doesn't know either since he just follows orders, but he's starting to realize this is all about revenge. Black then states that it doesn't matter who he's killed, he's never left a trace, but admits the boy is impressive. Activating his power, the protagonist says he'll have his revenge. But first, there's something he needs to find out. The creature starts getting surrounded by flames. Crow extends her hand and tries to intervene, but is stopped by Ghost, who tells her to pay attention to what the third legend is about to say. Raising her hands, the leader of the Bestias says she had no intention of interfering and asks what made the old man so loyal to the boy, and who the hell he even is. Trying to defend himself from the attack, Manbai thinks that the magic circles that boosted buffs were turned into traps, and wonders if Sue has some kind of tracking ability and why he's so fast and powerful. Harboy gains momentum and throws the creature against the wall. Falling to the ground while coughing up strawberry juice, Black laughs and says he's never met anyone like the young man. And even though he prides himself on knowing nearly everything about elite hunters, he'd like to know who the boy is, and what he wants so badly that he'd go that far. Blocking the attack like it was nothing, Sue steps on Manbei's back and says he misunderstood everything. After all, he's the one asking questions here. Stepping on the snake's head, the protagonist says that with a single wrong move, he can kill her, so she better shut up. Wounded Black says fine. Our boy grabs the creature by the face and tells him to speak louder, then asks who ordered Minjin's assassination. In his thoughts, Manbai is shocked to realize all of this is because of the historian. Smiling, he says now he's starting to understand. The protagonist tells him to confess if he wants to live. Grabbing Suu's hand, Black says the boy is right. But even if he says what the boy wants to hear, how does he plan to listen if his ears are going to be melted? We see the creature took the opportunity to spit venom from its mouth. Manbai then says that the first rule of an assassin is to never reveal the client. Coughing, the protagonist asks how the hell he just spat in his face. And healing himself, he says he's going to make the creature talk. With wide eyes, Black wonders why the hell he's dealing with a healer. He then decides to ask Crow for help. With her hands raised, she says she's surrounded. Stammering, Black says he'll tell the boy what he wants to know, quickly revealing that the client is Pande. Before finishing, the creature simply explodes, but Sue seems to have understood that it was pandemonium. Suddenly, the leader of the Bestia's eyes turn red, and she quickly takes out the team members around her. Removing her hood, she says that now she knows that the boy is Mad Dogi Min Siwu, a first-generation hunter who disappeared 10 years ago. Staring at the young woman with a firm gaze, our boy asks if she's also working with Pandemonium. Crow says no because her organization is basically a guild of assassins, so they don't get involved in personal contracts. She then reveals that she figured out who the protagonist was because her sister once spoke about a hunter with a strange healing ability. Sue asks if she really doesn't know anything, more if she's lying. Floating, the girl says she's telling the truth, and since he already knows so much about her, he should believe her. The leader asks Hedgehog to stand up while saying it's strange that she forgot Sue even existed. Using her power, she causes another explosion, which opens a hole in the ceiling. Leaving with her ally, Crow asks if Sue is going to follow them. Looking up, our boy says no because he already has everything he needs. The girl then says in that case, they'll meet again soon. Shu approaches and asks why the protagonist let the girls go, and he says it was that or end up buried in rubble. And since for now they've achieved their objective, they should focus on cleanup, which in this case is up to Jonggu. Looking at Black's body, he wonders what the hell Minjin discovered to be assassinated. A few days later, Sue still can't forget the name Pandemonium. Researching, he says that 20 years ago, the first gate opened on Earth and all kinds of things came through it, including mana, monsters, magic stones, countless rare resources, and demons, a race from another dimension naturally skilled in mana manipulation and specialized in abilities like awakened beings. We learn that after the first gate appeared, the creatures took advantage of the chaos to enter Earth, and besides taking control of the gates, they also treated humanity as an inferior species, building the Demon King's castle right in the middle of the continent, and that's when a group of treacherous humans swore loyalty to King Pandemonium. However, the creature's reign didn't last long since the first generation of hunters held them off. Thus, when the war broke out between humanity and the demons for survival on Earth, the humans came out victorious. And it was in the middle of that war that Sue was thrown into the rift. Thinking, he says that Pandemonium had already been defeated before the war ended, but now his name has suddenly resurfaced. Our boy decides to call for Free, who quickly responds. He then asks if demons also existed in the world they were in before, just with a different appearance. The parasite confirms and says that among the many races he encountered, demons are the most scattered across all dimensions. Sue says that even in that world, the creatures dominated and exploited other species, and he asks if they always act like that. Free says he's not sure because before meeting the boy, he had no memories, and all that remained was a feeling of having had something stolen by demons. But after encountering them for 100 years, he can confirm they're exactly the kind of bastards capable of doing anything. Impatient, Subu says that 10 years ago he was focused on killing demons instead of gathering more information, and all he knows is that the creature's mana pattern is different from humans, and that they got very good at imitating them. Frey asks why the protagonist doesn't just kill them all to solve the problem, but our boy says it's not that simple. Segjin enters the room and says that since his brother arrived early, he'd like to ask what kind of trouble he caused to have ended up renting an office. Stewu says he was only after answers about what happened to Minjin, but the guy with glasses says that Huan told him he wiped out an entire assassin organization, so he demands to know who the boy is hiding in the office. Even after repeatedly saying it was necessary to be discreet, pouting, Suwu says Bungu really has a big mouth. Then he asks Seijin not to worry because he plans to pay a visit to the president soon, since there are still many unanswered questions, and if he confronts the man directly, he might prevent him from taking any unnecessary action. Worried, the young man with glasses says his brother hasn't even fully recovered yet, but in any case, he won't force him to stop, even knowing he might end up in danger again. Stewu jokingly puts Seijin in a headlock and says he worries too much, and is acting like their dad. Pulling away, the guy says the protagonist has to keep his promise and, in exchange for the office, be responsible for training the guild's new recruits. Because Hunter Shin's ability is more complicated than they thought, and it would be good to have someone experienced take a look at the girl. Scratching his ear, our boy says he'll do it, but first they should go out to eat. Sejun asks if the boy is a walking black hole, considering he just had dinner. Free says he's hungry too and asks for chicken. The protagonist then says he's pretty sure Free is the reason his stomach is empty. Jongwoo calls and asks if Soo really wants his name kept off the case. Annoying, the protagonist tells the man to watch his tone because he already ratted him out to Sejun. The team leader says the boy doesn't understand how big the incident is, as now all media outlets want more information, to the point that the team members are overwhelmed by the flood of calls. Jongwoo also says the branch director has been watching them closely since the Gur incident, all because the boy left his name out. Stu asks if that means he's getting results. Desperate, the leader says that's not the point. The protagonist suggests he just say he got help from the White Lion Guild, but the man says he already contacted the organization. And considering the recent prison break incident, it would be better if the boy changed his mind. Our boy says no and informs him he's eating, so he's hanging up. Leaving the room, he says unbelievable things just keep happening. Sejun asks if that was team leader Hwang on the call, and confirming it, the protagonist says he really loves his job. He then asks what the latest news on the demons is according to his brother. The young man says that since the disappearance of the 4 demon lords, the creatures proposed a peace treaty, and afterward created an institute in the polar continent to research the mana that infiltrated Earth, causing no problems since then. That's why it's rare to see demons outside the polar continent, to the point that children believe the creatures are just urban legends. Soo reflects on the information about the peace treaty. Frey then says that has to be a lie, since a demon would never be a lover of peace. Our boy says he feels the same way, but also senses that not all demons may be the same, just like humans. Especially since Crow had a mana pattern similar to a demon's, but might still be different. Soo wonders if a human-demon hybrid could exist, and then states that in the beginning, this was all about avenging Minjin. But the more he follows the man's trail, the more he feels this fight will last far longer than expected. Meanwhile, in the polar continent, we see that Minjin is more than alive. Back at the office Soo rented, inside he tells Volk and Red to focus on circulating mana through their bodies, while becoming aware of their danchin. Confused, Shu asks what the hell a danchin is, then says that just sitting there and meditating won't help him increase his output. Annoyed, our boy says they begged him to train them, and now that's what he gets, and asks why nowadays everyone is just blowing things up without even understanding how mana control works. Volk asks if it's really necessary to do all that when you're already strong. In response, the protagonist says that just because he awakened his first skill inside an artificial portal, he thinks he knows everything, yet he doesn't even realize that the power difference depends entirely on how you burn the fuel called mana, so he'll explain it just once. Siwoo says that when a human feels mana for the first time, a storage space opens inside the body, which is where mana gathers. This place, along with the power it generates, is what's called the danchin, which when awakened, according to an individual's characteristics, manifests externally as abilities. That's why the density of an ability depends on how efficiently someone can control mana in their danchin. Thus, through continuous training, the danchin's capacity expands, allowing for greater mana storage, which makes understanding its essence fundamental, especially for beginners. And the best way to do that is through meditation, so everyone should shut up and focus. Once the explanation ends, our boy says that the next day he's going to push everyone's bodies to the brink of death. Suddenly, Jongwoo shows up at the door and asks if the protagonist knows how long he's been looking for him, with no one answering his calls. Simu says the man is starting to sound like a stalker, but the team leader says the branch director wants to see the boy. Sometime later, outside HMC's headquarters, the protagonist asks why the branch director is looking for him, and if Jongwoo was the one who turned him in. The man says no, and maybe the director wants to talk about the prison incident. A bit further ahead, 2 people stop in front of the pair. They're Seon Changwon, leader of the Gangnam team, and Hajumtae, senior agent of the team. Irritated, Jongwoo asks why the man is already back from his trip, saying it would have been better if he had returned quietly instead of picking fights with random people. Mocking, Seong says he just said hi and asks if the boy next to him is the rookie who stirred up trouble. Turning red with rage, the protagonist's team leader says he'll let the nonsense slide because of jet lag. Joining the conversation, Jumtae says their trip was to Japan, which means there's no need to adjust to jet lag. Seong tells the boy to leave the pair alone. After all, it must be frustrating to not even be able to catch weak awakened ones. The boy with glasses calls out to Soo and asks why he hasn't introduced himself, since he's standing in front of higher-ranking members from another team. Flipping them off, our boy says that's his greeting and asks why the 2 don't just move out of the way, since they apparently haven't noticed how wide they are even with the guy wearing glasses. Jumtae lets out a nervous laugh, and activating his power says he's going to teach the disrespectful rookie a lesson. Jongwoo asks if the guy's brain isn't working properly since he can't separate business from personal grudges. Seong then questions who the man thinks he is to be lecturing his subordinate and if he didn't hear what Soo said. The protagonist's ally says that apparently the one who didn't hear was him. Mocking, our boy says it's probably because the man's ears are clogged with fat. Furious, the guy in the purple shirt asks if he should teach them a lesson, since the entire headquarters team is watching, and take the opportunity to show who's really in charge around here. Suddenly, a hand grabs Seong's shoulder, It's Jian who apologizes and says that he's the one in charge. The two troublemakers are left speechless upon seeing the branch director. Without saying another word to the duo, the man says he now understands why Sue was late and that Jonggu should have done something. Then, hugging our boy, he asks if he likes tea. Seong yells and asks the director to wait a minute. Turning around, John says he heard rumors that the man was requesting extra services during the mission in Japan. So if he wants to be a great hunter, he should start by doing his own job instead of wasting time with nonsense. Puzzled, the other team leader asks who the hell that rookie is, but Jumty says he has no idea. Inside the director's office, the man comments that this is the first time he's meeting Sue in person. Our boy agrees and asks why he was called there. Smiling, Jian says he likes straightforward people, and that he called him there because he needs to ask about the ancient prison escort mission. Since, thanks to the Bestia incident, the investigation authority has been transferred to them, which means they can't ignore the fugitive prisoner. And since someone strong enough to defeat Jurt wouldn't just let Volk escape, he needs to know what really happened. Turning to Jonggu, the director asks him to leave the room for a few minutes. With no choice, he does. The man silently apologizes to the protagonist. Jivan then says he's not stupid, and that even though the team leader is competent, it's hard to believe he took down the assassin organization alone. Jin concludes by saying he won't let a fugitive criminal slide, especially knowing that Sue is involved in the case. That's why he consulted an old acquaintance who knows the boy very well. Turning to him, the protagonist asks who that would be. The director then says it's the legend of the first-generation hunters, the hunter Du Kang-ho, master of the Warrior Fighter Guild. Elsewhere, the hunter asks Sue how many years have passed, then says he could barely believe it when Jian said the boy was still alive. Drinking, the protagonist says a lot must have happened, seeing as the man has aged quite a bit. Smiling, Du Kang-ho says actually it's the boy who hasn't aged, since he disappeared 10 years ago but still doesn't have a single wrinkle. The man asks where the boy has been all this time if he knows how much his disciples search for him. Without answering, the protagonist says they should order another bottle of liquor, because they have a lot to talk about. After several hours and day turning to night, the hunter says it's hard to imagine what it was like spending 100 years in another world. While eating, our boy says that after he killed the demon king of the fourth dimension, a dimensional magic was activated. He just doesn't know if it was a skill or the power of an artifact. To his surprise, the hunter says the demon king is still alive. Shocked, Sue asks how the creature is alive if humans signed a peace treaty. Du Kang-ho tells the protagonist to calm down, explaining that the demon king is alive, but in pieces. He says that after the demon king was defeated, the other demons claimed the war was all of his fault and not the will of their kind. Furious, the protagonist says that actually the demons fell into crisis after their leader's fall. The hunter agrees but says that humanity's situation is also dire. We learn that since the first portal appeared, the world has been in chaos. Because of that, humans barely managed to close the gate, and it was at that moment that the war began, when everyone was already exhausted. After much fighting, the demons took the initiative and proposed a peace treaty. They also offered to help repair the damage in several countries while teaching humans how to close the gates. In exchange, the creatures demanded the Demon King's remains and a territory in the Arctic where they could stay until a portal to their dimension could be reopened. Since most citizens wanted to quickly restore the peace they had before the gate opened, the agreement was signed. During that time, high-level hunters representing their countries gathered to sign the treaty. The one who signed on behalf of Korea was Dasu, and since then, the demons haven't left their territory unless it was to provide support. When Sue disappeared, the hunters who distrusted the demons scattered, and over time, interest in the demons faded. Du Kang-ho says he didn't suspect the creatures either, but seeing the protagonist return like that is strange, since his existence vanished from all records over the past 10 years, leading to rumors that Dasu was responsible. Even so, from the second generation onward, almost no one knows the boy's name or his achievements. The hunter concludes by saying they fought countless battles together, and forgetting him in just 10 years doesn't seem normal. Our boy asks if the man thinks Dasu and the demons made deals behind the scenes. Du Kang-ho says yes, after all, they would do anything to defeat the boy. Hearing that makes Frey nervous, while Sue wonders if the president really did that. Out loud, he questions what the demons would gain by erasing him, since revenge alone doesn't seem like enough. The hunter then says, as he mentioned, the demons didn't do anything wrong and even helped humanity adapt to mana. Disagreeing, the protagonist says that if the creatures had an active superior, the war wouldn't have started. Du Kang-ho agrees and says the disciples who fought alongside the boy probably know more about the situation. Soo says contacting them isn't so easy. The master of the Warrior Fighter Guild says he knows that, but also knows that Kang Yeowa is from Korea and became an S-rank who now leads the Casual Flower Guild. Remembering the past, the man says the girl used to adore the boy and he didn't expect her to end up as Disu's subordinate. But since many things can change in 10 years, the huntress probably has her reasons. Downing an entire glass of liquor, Sue says it tastes awful. Outraged, the hunter asks if his taste buds changed. He then says he should have called Sejun instead. The protagonist replies that his brother would jump with joy just knowing they met. Suddenly, we see someone is watching the duo. Outside, a young man tells someone over the phone that he just sent a picture of the person Du Kang-ho met in person. The person receives the photo and says the boy did a good job, so he should come back. It's Yoa, who's somewhere else. Staring at the screen, the huntress says Su's name and declares that, as expected, the boy was alive. She then reveals she started suspecting it when strange movements began within the Empire Guild. Even though she felt Su was alive, Yoa shows deep surprise. With tears in her eyes, she calls the protagonist Master, then concludes she was right to have someone follow Du Kang-ho. After all, even when everyone was sure Su would never return, she never gave up, searching across the entire world. After much joy and sorrow, the huntress says she has to find her master immediately. Suddenly, Daesu appears and calls her. Without turning around, Yoa greets the man. He then says that when the two are alone, she can call him uncle and asks where she's going in such a rush. Hiding her phone, the huntress says it's nothing important. Grabbing her shoulder, the president says he knows that's not true, judging by the expression on her face, which can only mean that the bastard, Mad Dog Min-su, has returned. Getting straight to the point, the president asks why the girl is planning to run away like a dog who just found its owner. Without waiting for an answer, he says the huntress is still naive and foolish. He then claims that even if she's from the lineage he discarded, she's still his only niece, so he won't let her go that easily. Angrily, Yoa says she's always searched for her master from the very beginning. Daesu says he knows that, and that he also knows she suspected him of having something to do with Su's disappearance, but in the process, she ended up becoming useful. After all, in this world, every hunter is a huge asset, so he'll never give her up. Screaming, the girl asks what right he thinks he has after abandoning her in her hardest moment, then says it was her master who raised her. Agreeing, the president says the boy did that without knowing she's the daughter of a criminal. He then asks how she thinks Su will react when he finds out about her past, because no matter how much she pretends to be noble, she'll never be able to change her roots. Trembling, Yoa says the man is a bastard once she's alone again. The next day at a heliport, Shin asks what the names of the hunters are, then says she heard from the guild master that Su would personally lead the joint training, so she wants to know who those people behind him are. The protagonist says both of them are his apprentices, so she and the boy should treat them like they're seniors. Shin and Byong-guk introduce themselves and say they understand. Thinking to himself, Red says it's the first time he's seen a huntress that age with such an aura, so he'll trust her. Smiling, he says Shin will learn quickly. Excited, she says she'll do her best. Stu then says Volk will die if he messes around. Sweating inside his bear costume, Volk says he knows that and there's no way he can take this lightly. He then asks the protagonist to stop reminding him of his assassin days and moves ahead. The protagonist says it's time to enter the gate. Shin says she's nervous since it's her first time after leaving the tutorial tower. Our boy tells her not to be because gates are just doors. Disagreeing, Byong-guk says he's heard stories of people getting trapped because the gate closed mid-attack. Red says the boy has a point, but that nowadays humanity already has keys to the gates, so if someone gets scared, it won't gain anything. On the other side, the huntress is amazed by the view, then says she's feeling nauseous from the trip. Byong-guk comments on the lack of monsters at the entrance. With arms crossed, Su says it looks like they're going on a picnic. Volk says he doesn't understand the current situation because he's from the first generation. But clearing gates became a job as long as individuals pass the tutorial and get recruited. Impatient, the protagonist says this feels more like killing a few dozen monsters in a low-rank gate. He then asks the rookies to show their skills before the action starts. Obeying, the hunter wonders who the hell this guy thinks he is to act like he's in charge. He also thinks to himself that it's absurd to be training with someone who can't even manifest his own abilities. After a lot of effort, Shin says it's working, but suddenly, she's thrown backward. On the ground, she apologizes, but our boy says it's not the time for that. He then throws her a whip, which she doesn't understand at first. Su explains that it's a ritual support tool, and the more complex the patterns, the better the results of the item. So the huntress should use that as a base. The girl obeys and reactivates her ability with the whip in hand. Suddenly, Byong-guk shouts, warning about a goblin swarm that just appeared. Still seated, our boy says the duo should handle the situation, surprising the hunter. Even so, the protagonist says that as the instructor, he can't do anything, but they as apprentices can. Watching the boy's tracking ability, Red comments that handling that is pretty tough. He then states that if the hunter keeps using his power so recklessly, he'll run out of mana soon. Thinking, Byong-guk says it's outrageous that Su sent a rookie to deal with an entire swarm alone. Yelling, he asks Shin how much longer until she's done. She says she's almost there, but the hunter runs out of mana and a goblin takes advantage of his fall to attack. Luckily, Shin manages to activate her ability called Beast Tamer, which controls monster movements for 10 minutes, preventing the goblin from completing its strike. With a single finger, the girl tells the creature to back off, and making the goblin mimic her movements, she tells Su that's her taming ability. Volk comments that that kind of skill is very rare, while Red says he's excited to watch the girl grow. Frey tells Sue he needs to eat that ability, but the protagonist says that even though it's amazing, the method is useless if the girl only controls one creature. Surrounded by goblins, Shin screams to try to wake Byung-guk up, then begs for someone to save them. The girl deeply thanks Min Soo for that day. She finally learned the best way to use her abilities. The man in costume asks if she's okay to go home, and the protagonist suggests she talk to Sejun about getting another mentor. But the girl refuses. She feels much more confident now. She realized none of that defines her, so she keeps adapting and improving her mana, striving to be even better. The boy is proud of her progress and tells her to ask for help if she needs it. Suddenly, they see a group of people nearby and wonder if they're from a guild. The girl had heard it was a negotiation between the Blue Flower team and another group. The protagonist asks her about the first team. Shocked, she calls out to Huntermen. Apparently, that's no ordinary prison. The Empire discovered the bodies of the first hunters to enter. But unlike normal cases where they'd be destroyed by monsters, their bodies were intact, except for their internal organs. Kang Yeohwa finds that strange because that shouldn't be possible unless something was placed inside them. Suddenly, someone says the two have finally met. A boy appears, calling her by name. He says her master has returned and asks if she's not going to greet him. For a moment, she doesn't know what to say. Awkwardly, she comments that he really came back. He tries to invite her to talk, but she refuses. As she walks away, the boy follows her. The old man finds the girl rude for that behavior and asks the protagonist if any of them were his disciples. He confirms but says that boy. Apparently, Kang Yeohwa is crying. As he passes her, he says she's gone back to hiding and crying in corners. The protagonist asks what's going on and if it's because of Sejun. He also asks why she always takes a combat stance when she's crying. He brings up Sejun again and asks if she trained him better. She says she was just a lost girl when he started training her. Kang Yeohwa thanks him for how he saved her, but asks him not to meddle in her life. But he doesn't care and goes back to acting like he's her older brother. He says that being born into a world like that is already horrible and asks to at least be allowed to choose his own family. The young man sees her as his little sister and asks if she can't see him as her brother too. Stubbornly, the red-haired woman says she doesn't need that. The young man asks if she wants him to train her to death, which is strange because he already does that. The woman says she never intended to be the master's little sister or his disciple. She tried to help him while also dealing with her own feelings. Abandoned or not, she grew up with the wealth they plundered. Feelings like that were never meant for her. According to the young woman, as frustrating as it may be, Choi Dae-soo was right. Even so, she can't just sit and do nothing. The girl is determined to fight to the end for the master who saved her. In an office room, a man is nervous. He calls out for Yeohwa Nuna, then asks what she's doing there at that hour. The young woman tells him to pay attention because it's important. In another room, a man argues that it's not that he doesn't trust someone entirely. He says that since the appearance of the gates, the three reverences have led the fight against the demons. They'd fought dangerous battles. The man in front of him tells him to stop stalling and get straight to the point. He says he finally met Min Soo. He finds that suspicious. 10 years ago, must even tamed a mad dog, making him hesitate and assess the situation first. But Kamo is different. He doesn't create illusions. He says he doesn't seek peace, nor the safety of the nation or humanity. He finds the comment about the three reverences hilarious, because what he desires is supremacy. He says they should see how far he can go, what lies beyond the limits. He wants to destroy resilient opponents and become stronger, no matter what kind of deals he has to make with demons. Every world leader reached out to demons under the pretense of accelerating their nations and citizens' recovery. At the time, negotiations were the best choice, and no one should blame him for that. Kang-ho is left speechless and asks if he was involved in Min Soo's disappearance. The boss denies it and says that if Soo is back, now is the perfect time to destroy him. It's all very convenient. There are still a few more things he wants to ask. Then we see the protagonist surrounded by magic. He tells Choi Dae-soo it's been a while since they last saw each other. The young man uses magic with his hands and uses it to destroy the glass wall separating them. The man with the eye patch even cracks a smile. And the boy says he tried entering through the front door, but the process was too complicated. He comments that they should begin the chase before any plague slips in. He asks if it was him who sent him to the demon realm. But Choi Dae-soo says that was a flashy entrance for such a dull question. The young man tells him to shut up and answer the damn question. However, the man keeps stalling without answering. Irritated, the young man causes more things to break. He warns that if he doesn't want to die right there, he better answer immediately. He needs to know if he was involved in Minjin's death. He threatens that if he laid a finger on Yeohwa or any of her disciples. Choi Dae-soo gives a devilish smile and then starts laughing. He says he lost all his strawberry juice and the tension of the battlefield. He comments that while he was wasting time in the demon realm, he used his position to fight the strongest hunters. The old rivalry no longer excites him. For him, that's not enough to risk his life in battle. With a smile, Soo asks if he'll have to finish him off before he starts talking again. Kang-ho stops both of them from attacking each other, because they shouldn't do that in a civilian area, and they're important people. Other security personnel notice the commotion confused, and that applies to Soo too. His safety still isn't guaranteed. Unless he wants to tarnish both his and his brother's reputations, he better stop right now. Choi Dae-soo says he's as annoying as ever. To him, things were more fun before, when they used to fight and bicker constantly. He considers that an incredible era. He also says he had nothing to do with Min Jun's death. As for Kang Yeo-hwa, she joined him of her own free will. The man turns and tells him to come back another time if he has more questions, but the protagonist says nothing. Kang Ho also has nothing to say. Then a knock is heard at the door. The boss tells his subordinate not to worry, since there's no one stronger than him, and the guard apologizes. Choi tells him to contact Kunuriang Dasuj and requests that they prepare an A-rank gate and bring Kang Yeo to him. Finally, night falls in that place, and we see a scene from 7 hours earlier. Kang Yeo says that an autopsy showed all their internal organs were ruptured on a cellular level. Either they faced opponents with specific abilities or drank something. But the problem is that all these hunters were connected to a mysterious trade guild called IZ. They kept such a low profile that no one heard a thing from them. There are rumors that their golden leader is a demon. The woman says she will handle this her way even if he doesn't believe her. She will try to uncover more information, but before that, her friend calls out to her. He wants to know why she's doing this, but Nuna only asks him not to tell the master. Saijin thinks she didn't stay with Choi Dae-soo for 10 years without a reason. He leans back in his chair, thoughtful. Even if she joined Choi Dae-soo to track traces of the Hyungs, now that he's back, there's no reason to act this way. Saijin doesn't fully trust any of them because they all have their secrets. He's dying to know what's on their minds and what they're planning. Suddenly, Hyung is in the room and asks what the girl told him. The boy gets nervous about it. The protagonist warns that it's best not to lie to him and asks if something happened to Kang Yeo. The guildmaster is standing in front of a car. Another group apologizes for the interruption and says the boss is calling. Realizing that Sigjin revealed her secret, she becomes irritated. And now there's nothing else to do. 10 years ago, shortly after Min Soo disappeared, a man is summoned to erase his memory. This guy is one of those who brought the Demon King of the 4th dimension to the brink of death. According to the Demon Tribe's control, the Demon King's authority must be absolute. He says it would be mutually beneficial if the demon race could maintain control over everything. Koi says that's absurd, that it was the humans who won the war. There's no reason for him to accept that offer. But the demon says they've been watching him for a long time, and a new power has been discovered and its possibilities are endless, but time is running out. The demon goes on to say that the man wants to fight strong opponents, so he says he can help him reach maximum mana. Choi asks if he's doing all this just because he can't accept that the Demon King lost, and asks if he doesn't see him as a threat to the demons. But the spirit denies it, saying both perspectives are different. Then he leaves and says he'll await an answer. Now Choi is imagining himself as the strongest man in South Korea. Suddenly, he's inside the F-rank gate. His employee appears and says they search for another empty gate. It belongs to the Infinite Guild, and there are no monsters inside. The boss asks if he sent the invitations correctly. Even after confirming, the young man begins to mention a problem with tomorrow's meeting, but Choi confirms and tells him not to make him repeat himself. Suddenly, a woman appears saying he should have held a business meeting. It's Kang Yeo, who asks what he's doing there, but the boss tells her to be careful with her words. She repeats her question again, so she must assume he had something to do with Min Soo's disappearance. She says that at the time he didn't cooperate with the demon's proposal, but now it's different. Even knowing that his records were disappearing, he did nothing. The woman asks what nonsense he's talking about. He says that back then his actions were questioned, but now it's different. He wanted to be sure he was stronger than Min Soo. He tries to attack her, and she screams, calling him a crazy bastard. She says the demon's proposal makes no sense at all. Furious, she brings up the disappearance of the records and her master's vanishing. Choi says she's exactly like her mother, especially her strength and temper. The two were using their powers in that fight. The young woman falls to the ground, and Choi says she's nothing but a tool. He says the inferiority complex that used to haunt him is gone. Now that Min Soo has returned, everything changes. Laughing, the woman says her master won't take part in that ridiculous game. But Choi doesn't agree with that. He says that back then, Soo wouldn't have wasted time with something as trivial as family. But that boy left many things behind. The man will play his cards and use the girl as a spark. He uses his power to create chains, passing those chains through the girl's body. Then he tells her not to resist because that item is extremely strong, even for her. It's strong enough to leave her paralyzed. The girl says that even so, he's still trash. Suddenly, she notices a massive commotion. The protagonist appears at full strength and destroys everything in his path. Koi says it's useless because the story will be rewritten. He shouts that the stagnant hero of the past will be destroyed right there. But the protagonist considers all of that utter nonsense and unleashes his full power, emitting beams of light in every direction. Koi starts laughing, also ready. He says 10 years separate them. The warrior says there's no time to worry about things like that. He calls out to Pri and tells him they need to execute a full retreat. Min says the two of them should go all out, and his companion says the enemy is stronger than anything he's ever seen, and he's not sure if he can absorb an ability of that level in his current body. The protagonist says it's fine because it's only 50% of the power he used in the other world. Koi observes the conversation and asks if the hero regrets coming in with so much confidence. After hearing that, Suo charges full force toward his enemy, and says that for an opponent like him, just a portion of his power is enough. The environment around them begins to suffer from the overwhelming power, and from a distance, Kang Yeowa watches the battle. She's shocked by the difference in power between rank S and rank SS. In battle, Choi says it's been a long time since he felt that sensation, so he drops all restrictions and throws himself directly into the essence of mana. Min reflects that even after 10 years, the enemy hasn't dropped the habit of collecting and showing off his toys, and notices a large movement coming from the cliff. After that, the rock cracks, and a bright light bursts from within. Realizing it's Choi, surrounded by an immense amount of mana, Pri asks if he's really human, because he's capable of fighting a demon on equal footing, and Min replies that he's always been kind of a gorilla, but still just a mediocre human. The protagonist then prepares to absorb the enemy's blow. Choi rushes in with tremendous force, firmly gripping his sword and surrounded by mana. He tells Min he won't even have time to blink. The protagonist then shields himself, enveloped by a bubble of energy, while waiting for the enemy's attack. Confidently, Choi says he doesn't need much to touch him, because that shield is pathetic. He then unleashes his attack, saying he'll reduce him to dust. Min counters, launching an attack called Spear of Ice Fangs, and with that, he manages to stop his enemy, forcing all this power to be contained. After the battle, Choi says a true master isn't defeated so easily, and the protagonist responds, telling him to release Kangwa. The girl asks how her enemy can act so indifferent even after using such a pathetic attack. But according to the man, that's not right. She's capable of fighting much better than she just did. That detail alone is what makes the protagonist so special, and he questions whether that kind of honor is enough for someone who's the daughter of an assassin. Consumed by rage, the woman screams at him to shut up immediately. She begins to cry and threatens him, demanding that he not say another word. Suddenly, the warrior orders Kangwa not to move. If she does, she might get even more hurt. Choi is then surprised by what he sees, because Min is concentrating a massive amount of power that makes his skin tingle. So the man braces himself and says that now the real battle will begin. Upon hearing that, the hero charges toward the enemy, telling him to shut his mouth. Choi watches and reflects on the protagonist's mana control, and prepares to counterattack, saying that even after 10 years, Min still hasn't changed his cowardly fighting style. Min replies that his enemy doesn't even know what battle strategy is. The man then says he was young at the time, and used to act impulsively, without thinking. But now, after watching the hero's attacks, he's realized something. The protagonist is confused by this statement and questions him. Choi says that Min is no longer his equal, and strikes a powerful blow with his sword. Watching from a distance, Kangwa screams for her master, and is in shock at the situation. Back in the battle, the hero says that Choi finally said something worthwhile, because they really aren't equals. The protagonist then blocks his rival's attack, firmly holding his powerful sword, a sword capable of cutting through entire buildings. Yet, against Min, it causes no damage at all. Choi asks the protagonist if he spent the last 10 years fighting. He replies that he's been doing it for 100 years, and unleashes a powerful attack against his enemy, throwing him far away. On the ground, the man says he's enjoying the fight quite a lot. After getting up, he walks toward the hero, asking if he was saving mana for that strike. Choi also says that in that case, he'll have to use all his power too, revealing his special bracelet for SS rank hunters, saying it exists to regulate technical, physical, and mana abilities, and anyone who removes it becomes a wanted criminal. He throws it to the ground and says he finds it disgusting. Hearing and seeing this, Min replies with sarcasm, saying that a dog collar suits his enemy, and continues, asking if he reached S rank just to get government approval to fight. Choi tells the hero he overestimates himself because that's not the only reason he's there. But facing Min Soo is still an interesting challenge. After all, he hadn't found a worthy challenge to test his power until now. The protagonist responds, saying his rival really loves showing off, but now it's time for him to show what he's capable of. After hearing this, the hunter fires a massive blast of power at the protagonist, who defends himself. Meanwhile, Kangwa suffers from the pain caused by the aftermath of the clash. The girl reflects that just the mana shock between the two is enough to crack the ground, and if it continues, innocent people could end up suffering. Therefore, she needs to stop this, no matter what it costs. The battle continues, and the consequences only escalate, damaging everything around them. The rivals are locked in a fierce duel, unleashing all the power of their manas. Choi then grabs his weapon and fires an attack toward Min. The hero counters, asking Pri to release the Thunder Strike. Even while nauseous, his companion manages to unleash the power with incredible force. Choi reflects that even using his full power, the gap is still too big, and that deeply frustrates him, making him scream in indignation. The hunter then grabs his weapon and throws it toward the protagonist. During its path, a monster emerges from inside the artifact. The beast bites the hero, who is shocked by what just happened. Min then needs to act quickly, and tells Pri to activate the Tamer ability. Choi is surprised by what the hero just did, and wonders what he's been doing these past 10 years. Min tells the creature that he is now its new master and orders it to attack the rival. The hunter realizes what's about to happen and prepares himself. But suddenly, Kangwa appears, stepping into the middle of the clash. The girl asks if they've gone insane, pointing at all the destruction they caused. The portal is about to collapse and a global tragedy could happen. She tells Choi that if it does, he'll go straight to an international tribunal. The hunter responds, calling her an arrogant brat. Kanwa continues, saying she's already contacted the HMCS and it shouldn't take long for them to respond, so the time has come to end the fight. Min hears what the girl says and becomes reflective. Suddenly, Choi's bracelet starts beeping. He picks it up from the ground and sees he's receiving a call. It's Edward from HMCS saying he has something urgent to discuss, and it needs to be as soon as possible. The hunter responds, saying he's on his way to headquarters. As he walks away, he says that's why you shouldn't take in a wild creature. And now, he's lost interest. Choi says it's over now and leaves. Kanwa reflects on the fact that Min discovered her origins, because she never wanted to betray the person who treated her with sincerity and kindness, and now she doesn't know how to explain to him that she's the daughter of a criminal. Observing the situation, the protagonist approaches the girl and asks if she's okay. Kanwa hears what her master says, and becomes emotional as she realizes how loving he truly is. The girl then hugs him with great joy, and he returns the gesture, saying she has way too much energy. The laptop is open and the president comments that he doesn't understand why he's going so far based solely on the testimony of one hunter. He explains that legally speaking there was no violation. Meanwhile, Kanwa is on the phone confirming that the hunter really caused a huge mess. Desu thinks the way they chose to respond to the situation is a bit over the top. Mr. Blackwood stares at him with a certain arrogance from the other side of the screen. Respectfully, he says that was before he removed the limiter. He listens to everything with anger, and Blackwood continues, explaining that SS rank hunters are prohibited from engaging in personal fights. He also emphasizes that using magic against a hunter affiliated with HMCS is enough to issue an arrest warrant. Worse than that, given the leader's position, he could even be brought to trial by an international court. The leader's voice continues with heavy accusations, stressing that under international law, there would be enough grounds. But then he claims that in times of peace, there's no need to cause such chaos, so he asks the president to handle this independently within Korea. On the other side of the call, Blackwood stands up and concludes that they still need to hear from the person involved for a better assessment. Sipping a cup of coffee, he says he'll meet the man who got into a fight with an SS rank hunter. As he ends the call, the old man wonders if that's really how things are going to be. Staring out the window of his office, he says in a threatening tone that he'll be waiting for him in Korea. Dazu remains irritated with the situation because he knows he'll have to face Soo again, and Soo is much more skilled. In his memories, he recalls the moment he realized the young man was better, even though he still hoped to surpass him. In these 10 years, Soo became stronger, almost as if he had changed species. Even after all this time, the old man tried to become stronger and still can't accept the power gap between them. He wonders how many years it's been since he last felt the adrenaline of risking everything, fighting without any restrictions. Looking at his fists, he knows the strength he's gathered still isn't enough. Thoughtfully, he comes to the conclusion that at least now he's found a target worth defeating. The mad dog is finally back. A week later in Cheongwa, at the board meeting, everyone is chatting casually and Suwoo, along with Mang Yeowa, tells his colleague that she didn't greet him. The young woman shyly says she felt unworthy, but in any case, she's very happy that the master returned. In a teasing tone, the young man replies that she really is. But Yeowa becomes uncomfortable, especially because he wants updates on the Minjin case. Her investigation led nowhere, and she only managed to confirm that the person responsible wasn't from within the country. Frustrated, the hunter explains that the only reason Choi Dasu kept her as a subordinate was for personal gain. She gets nervous and says it has nothing to do with them sharing the same blood type, that everything was based on evidence. But he puts his hand on her head and says he knows very well that if he had seen her as family, he never would have done something so despicable. Awkwardly, she says the master already healed her and that now everything is fine. But it's not about being fine. It's about breaking free from the chain that ties her to the lineage of those idiots. He adds that no matter what crimes her mother committed, her life is completely different. Looking into her eyes, Sue advises that if she feels guilty, then the best way to repay the world is by living as well as she can. During that conversation, he remembers when the two of them spoke among the rubble of that fight and he promised to help her. Yeowa lets out a small, shy laugh. She truly believes she wouldn't have survived on her own and that the help she received was crucial. Her eyes fill with tears because even so, she feels she put Sejun through unnecessary stress. Thinking about the young man, she imagines how difficult it must have been for him to trust her with so many secrets. The master states that Sejun has always been cautious and that the two of them need to have a talk tomorrow. The girl gets anxious just thinking about it, but the master emphasizes that they're both adults and the meeting is already set. Scrolling through his phone, he says he has no idea how Dasu managed to clean up the mess from that day, and that Sejun has a strong intuition. Suddenly, they're interrupted by Hwang Jungdu saying he tried calling about an urgent matter, but he didn't pick up. Big Gun-ho comes right behind him, saying they received a call from HMCS, announcing that Vice President Blackwood is coming to Korea just to meet with him and asking if he's aware of it. Min Soo concludes that Edward got involved, and that's a pain in the ass. Feeding ignorance, he asks what reason the Vice President would have to seek him out. There's a gag order on the matter across the entire branch, but they haven't received any details. However, the branch chief wants to know what happened and thought Sue might say something, since his name was mentioned. With a bow, the young man says that if there's a gag order, he can't speak on the matter. Gun-ho decides not to press further and says he'll notify him of the schedule when HQ personnel arrive. As they leave the room, the chief presses Jung-gu to find out why one of Dazu's allies is meeting with him. Noticing the looks directed at her, Yeowa suggests they head back. On the street, the two continue chatting amicably and joking around. But what Sue really wants to know is what her next move will be. Her plan is to follow his orders, as she intends to do everything she can to help, since Minjun's death left many questions. A tinted car approaches the two of them. Both are caught off guard, and the young woman instinctively positions her arms in front of Sue in a defensive stance. As the window rolls down, a man's voice echoes from inside, saying that even after everything, she still chose to include him after all. That person is Choi Dasu. Sue says he doesn't intend to deal with those demons, just to entertain a maniac like Dasu. He tells him not to waste his time and, in a mocking tone, tells him to call like he's planning to die soon. The old man continues sarcastically and questions the young man about his strange hobbies and his attachment to weaklings who can't even reach his level. Irritated, Subu says he'll regret this day. He slams the car door and watches it speed off down the avenue. The image of a young woman appears as someone reflects on a half-demon. At the HMCS headquarters, staff wonder if the council has actually arrived. Earlier, when Dasu found Sue and Kangwei in the street, it was a major surprise and he ordered the young man into the vehicle. The young woman gets furious with him and asks how he dares. Unbothered, the old man says she needs to hear something before continuing that sentimental master-disciple game. Aggressively, she steps forward as if about to attack him, but the young man holds her back. Then Sue says he'll contact her later and decides to get in the car. Kangwei is left standing on the sidewalk, still indignant. The car speeds off, leaving her behind. As the driver navigates through the streets, the two begin talking. Sue asks how he can be so calm after getting beaten up, but Dasu says the fight isn't over yet. He says things are getting interesting, and thanks to him, he now has something to focus on and will make sure to arrange a fight. The young man replies with sarcasm, barely believing that someone like him is actually a president. And then Dasu says a name Sue knows all too well, Pandemonium. There are many remnants of that group, one that should have been wiped out, scattered across the world. After Sue disappeared, they approached Dasu through demons and asked to erase his record. The old man raises the important question of whether they're just another cult or a hidden arm of the demons. Since the demons fell and were exiled to the polar circles, their traces vanished. The president continues his reasoning, saying not even the leaders of nations have managed to track the movements of these beings. However, he recently learned that there's still a group of half-demons in the deserts of the Middle East. Sue appears irritated and surprised by this statement. In that region, there are people who ended up becoming demons due to exposure or being born of interracial unions. But unlike the purebloods, they have no wings or horns, making them harder to identify, yet they use black mana. That's all he's heard from official government sources, since getting permission to enter could be difficult. Dasu asks Sue if during these 10 years he's been working with the beasts, given that he wielded black mana. The young man denies it, but the president suggests that even if he despises demons, he wouldn't be able to resist the power. Sharply, the young man fires back, saying he's nothing like him and asks the driver to stop the car. He slams the brakes and turns off the engine. As he steps out of the car, Sue tells Dasu not to misunderstand or misinterpret things. At the company, employees gossip about the reasons for Mr. Blackwood's visit. They are already gathered in the branch director Baek Gun-ho's office. The director finally introduces Hunter Sue from the North Korea branch. Seated comfortably, Blackwood greets him politely. But the young man skips the formalities and immediately asks what Edwin is plotting this time. The company's vice president then asks for a minute alone with the hunter. Though not pleased with the request, curious to understand what's going on between them, Gun-ho has no choice but to leave. He announces he'll wait outside, ready in case anything happens, and thinks to himself that the young man better be careful. As soon as everyone leaves the room, Sue gets cursed out by Blackwood. Grabbing him by the collar, the vice president demands to know where Sue has been for the past 10 years. Then he punches him in the chest. Dropping the drama and jokes, he says he's just happy his friend is back. Tired, the hunter doesn't even have the strength to answer that question again and asks that they just relax a bit. Sometime later, the two are catching up and Blackwood is stunned to learn that Sue was in another dimension. Once, the young man was the key figure of this world and his existence faded from memory. But now, those memories are resurfacing in Edward's mind. After all, he asks, how could he forget someone who saved his life multiple times during the chaos? Modestly, Sue disagrees and changes the subject, asking how he got in contact with Yeowa. He explains that HMCS is investigating multiple cases involving the corporation around the globe. One of those branches is in Cheongwon, where the woman acts as a leader, and thanks to that, he managed to get her contact. Changing topics, Blackwood takes the chance to offer Sue a transfer to the main headquarters. Without even thinking, the young man refuses the opportunity, and the vice president is left frustrated and confused. He argues that someone this talented should be somewhere better, but the hunter admits he's working on an independent investigation. Blackwood counters that he could benefit from the company's resources and its investigative authority, which is far more powerful. Finally, Suwoo says he'll think about it and asks what this investigation is really about. A portal was discovered in a desert region, and an incident caused the death of several people by poisoning. Suwoo is shocked to learn this was due to people using illicit enhancement drugs. Still confused about the substance, Suwoo tries to understand what kind of awakening drug it is. His friend confirms that they still don't have exact evidence on the nature of the toxin or its distribution network. An ongoing investigation has cataloged awakened individuals who were destroyed around the world over the last 6 months. During autopsies, they discovered the victims' bodies ruptured internally at the cellular level. Even after examining other body parts, they couldn't identify any drugs and closed the cases as most of the victims were criminals. Until a witness appeared in China who saw something similar. This person saw with their own eyes a man sniffing a black powder and then being overtaken by rage until he self-destructed. Those who inhaled it unlocked mana bursts and enhanced their abilities, turning into living bombs. Suwoo is processing all this information but wants to know how this connects to the desert incident. Blackwood continues saying yes, they believe that area is the starting point of the entire case. However, the hunter questions how it could be the beginning if the situation started 6 months ago. And he goes on to explain that it was by analyzing the perimeter that they managed to collect a sample of the powder. Additionally, Kang Yeowa also found the suspicious vehicle from a small corporation near the location. Reflective, the young man finds it irritating that everything always seems to happen in the Middle East. Changing the subject, Blackwood mentions he knew Kang Yeowa was his disciple. She was the first to come into contact with the substance and ended up getting involved in the investigation. If Suwoo helps her, Layla warns she'll face fewer problems due to this case. Pushing further, he appeals to emotion, saying the young woman is in danger and asking if he plans to ignore that. Then he calls him Mad Dog. The hunter becomes pensive, realizing that Blackwood carefully laid the groundwork for this conversation. In the end, he agrees to go to the Middle East, especially since he already has matters to deal with there. With that, Blackwood is very pleased and says that with his help, they'll be able to do much more. Later, Blackwood wants to know why Suwoo and Dasu got into an unauthorized fight. But the young man doesn't even care, even though it was a violation, and says the old man is just a pile of ambitious trash. A long letter is laid out on the office desk. Dasu has just written the final line, and thinking about Suwoo concludes that he's still human. Suwoo's brother asks if the young man will be joining the headquarters of the international investigators. The suitcases are already packed for the trip. He confirms that he will because young Edward personally asked him. He confirms he knows him but doesn't understand how they got in touch. Without giving details, Suwoo says some things happened and Yeowa will explain everything. The phone rings and he answers. It's her on the other end of the line, and Suwoo's brother walks away to give them space to talk. While packing a few more things, he hears Pri asking if there's chicken in Europe. Out of nowhere, he asks if this time Suwoo won't have to push his mana to the limit like last time. Teasing Pri playfully, he replies by asking if he's scared he'll use up all his energy. But Pri says he's not that small, he can handle it. The problem is that something strange is happening to him. Stu wants to know what kind of strange thing's going on. Pri reveals that since they returned to this world, he's been losing control of his own power every time Suwoo gets stronger. In other words, the side effects of interdimensional travel didn't affect just the hunter. That battle where he pushed himself to the limit acted like a trigger. And ever since they made a contract in the other world, Pri has no intention of attacking his host. But the stronger the mana becomes, the worse it will be for both of them, and the consequences are immeasurable. Suwoo finally understands the situation. However, he doesn't believe he's that dependent on Pri's power, unless they need to fight demons, which isn't the case yet. Jokingly, the young man comments that even though it was boring, the fight with Dasu was very useful. Reflectively, the hunter thinks about the so-called awakening drug. Suwoo finally boards the plane headed for Europe. Meanwhile, Kumo and Hikari try to explain that it goes against protocol to invite someone like that into a confidential investigation, especially because Hikari is already an Asian representative and part of the team. As the girls are talking, Kemu arrives full of compliments and says Hikari is the most beautiful woman in the world. Layla is still angry about the situation and disagrees with Blackwood's decision, saying she'd rather keep working with Yeowa. Hikari gets jealous of her friend. Suddenly, someone interrupts them and says that Director Leone has ordered an immediate assembly in the conference room. That can only mean, to their displeasure, that the new team member has arrived. The man confirms that he just landed at the airport with President Blackwood. Layla is stunned that the VP himself brought him, as if he were someone extremely important. Getting confirmation that he's an agent from the Korean branch, she names him Min Suwoo. The two disembark and walk in silence, carrying their luggage. The team is gathered in the conference room, and Blackwood opens the meeting by thanking everyone for being there. He introduces Hunter Min Suwoo from the Korean branch. Then he introduces Layla and Stefan to the hunter, until Hikari introduces herself and also introduces her assistant Kumo. With the formalities out of the way, the president doesn't want to waste time and gets straight to the point, as they're dealing with an urgent case. Politely, he asks Layla to give a brief summary of the situation. But since they're dealing with sensitive information, Blackwood is unexpectedly interrupted by his secretary. With a word of encouragement to Team 1, he stands and leaves the room. For a brief moment, an awkward silence falls over the room. Layla clears her throat before resuming what she was about to start. Finally, she begins the briefing. She activates the project display and starts her explanation. The team was assigned to investigate the perimeter where the drugs were discovered. The final classification of the portal was AA rank. Several bodies were discovered containing a chemical additive. Around the portal, traces of battle were also identified. No drugs were found inside the portal, so they're waiting for the investigation to conclude before authorizing an assault. In addition, another issue raised was the presence of vehicles parked just a few meters from the site. Sue listens attentively to everything. From now on, the investigation will focus on exploring the internal part of the portal and conducting other observations around it. After finishing, Layla asks if anyone has any questions. Bored, Sue says he already knew all of that, so he has no questions. Hikari and Kumo glare at the young man with clear discomfort while he asks if maybe there are demons inside. Layla finds the comment strange and asks if he's suggesting that those beings are involved in this case. But the hunter insists he only wants to check the information to be sure. After all, if this drug was created by humans using an ability, the hunters could easily track it. Sue believes the company behind the vehicle is highly suspicious and requests access to all information collected about it. Hikari questions why Sue is bringing up topics that aren't related to the case. But the young man remains unfazed and says this still needs to be verified as he's only sharing information based on what he heard. The leader lets out a sarcastic laugh. She keeps mocking the certainty with which Sue speaks, pointing out that not even the directors considered such hypotheses. Calmly, he watches her, and she argues that if it were truly an important lead, the council wouldn't have overlooked it. She continues belittling the hunter's presence, saying he parachuted into the investigation and immediately started spouting nonsense. With conviction, she also notes that it's been 10 years since humans and demons signed an agreement, and bringing up that theory is discriminatory. Raising her voice, she's about to ask who he thinks he is, but Layla steps in and stops her colleague from continuing. Stefan asks everyone to calm down. Layla agrees and says a lot is at stake, so they should focus on solving the case. She then orders Sue to stick to the investigation's objectives. They move on to the next topic of the meeting, the incursion they'll make into the desert the following day. Hours later, the meeting ends with the group agreeing to meet at the airport. Curious and irritated, the leader from Japan still wants to know who this newcomer is. She speaks with her assistant to understand how someone like him could just show up out of nowhere and still receive special treatment from the vice. Layla overhears everything and advises her to let it go without stressing too much, but Hikari thinks she's taking his side. The leader explains that, in truth, she found him much more experienced than she expected. Sue yawns in the meeting room while processing all the information. Talking to Frey, he says this is going to be more annoying than he imagined. Frey agrees, saying he's an outsider. Blackwood suddenly shows up, saying the young man sure made an entrance into the group. The hunter jokes that his friend must have a pretty busy schedule since it took forever for him to show up. In a friendly tone, the vice says the International Investigation Agency feels like child's play. Referencing Stan Lee, the young man says that with great power comes great responsibility. Then the vice asks what he thought of the team. Without pretending, Sue says he found them kind of annoying but doesn't mind as long as they don't interfere with his work. Blackwood isn't surprised and says his friend hasn't changed a bit in these past 10 years. But he feels obligated to remind him that the desert visit will be just a routine procedure and Sue shouldn't cause trouble. It's a cloudy day in the Middle East. The HMCS branch welcomes the visitors from Team 1. The branch chief gives them a warm welcome and says they can head to their accommodations and rest. He informs them that a car has been arranged to take them into the desert the next day. Blackwood thanks him for the hospitality and Frick complains about the unbearable heat to Sue. The hunter notes that there are no traces of demons in the city and the mana density seems good, questioning if there might be some mistake. A woman suddenly interrupts his thoughts, calling for his attention. It's Hikari, and on alert, she tells the young man to stay sharp in that place if he doesn't want to end up dead. But all he can think is how irritating all of this is. Grabbing Sue's suitcase, the branch chief asks about half-demons. He claims he's never seen one in person but knows they live in a village in the desert. The hunter keeps questioning people in the company, but no one seems to know much about this cult. A young woman says half-demons are no different from people and that unless you have a mana identifier, it's impossible to tell them apart. Things have improved a bit, but a decade ago, the war between the two peoples was intense. Observing the people, he thinks that hiding and pretending to be human would be a more plausible option because no one would notice. He scratches his head like he's facing a puzzle, frustrated that he couldn't get more information. Then he decides to go into the desert on his own, and Free asks if he's a lone wolf. Sue keeps walking and watching the people when he comes across a guy arguing loudly on the phone. Free keeps whispering that while everyone moves around in groups, he just wanders alone through the city. The hunter sits down and simply says he's enjoying some alone time doing his investigation. Then Sue hears someone calling his name. It's Layla, and she wants to know why he's out there instead of resting in his accommodations at the company's headquarters. The hunter simply says he's taking advantage of some alone time to get a head start on a few checks, and tosses the question back to Layla. According to her, Stefan is finalizing a few authorizations to enter the portal and assessing the risks involved. Layla says she's interested in the work Soo does at the Korean branch since she's never seen him there during her visits to headquarters. The hunter clarifies that he was only recently recruited. Surprisingly, she compliments him, saying that from her perspective, Soo looked like someone with 20 years of experience. Graciously, he returns the compliment, saying the vice president told him she's well known for her work in Europe. The leader gets a bit flustered and modestly says she's just an investigator working in the northern region of the continent. He then recalls that he once worked with a man from that region named Hans Schroeder. Layla repeats the name like she might know something. Taking out her phone, she shows a photo to Soo and asks if he's talking about that man. The young man looks at the image for a while. Gazing at the smiling photo of an older man, Soo recognizes him even after all this time. He asks how she knows him, and the girl admits that he's her uncle, but she never expected him to be friends with a hunter from Asia. The leader observes that she and Soo seem to be about the same age, and he laughs awkwardly, saying that's a long story. Reflectively, she says that if Hans were awake, he'd be very happy. Layla then explains that due to portal syndrome, her uncle has been in a coma for 2 years. The hunter seems surprised to hear that. Thinking about the hospitalized man, he says there are many mysteries surrounding mana and portals and how they affect humans. Recalling the situation, the leader says her uncle got trapped inside a portal while searching for a lost teammate. He was rescued already unconscious, and since then it's been the hunter's abilities keeping him alive. All this time she's searched for anything that could save his life, but hasn't had much luck. Stu mentions that he's heard some portals release recovery items like elixirs. Layla admits that finding something like that is her last hope since Hans is the only family she has left. Then Stefan returns with an update, saying everything is set for their portal expedition. They're ready to go, but the leader still needs to notify Hikari and Kumo. The hunter gets up and walks toward the car, silently mulling over his thoughts. The team drives through the sand dunes toward the portal. Hikari is impatient with all the delays and the difficult path. Stefan, who's behind the wheel, says the GPS isn't working and he has to navigate manually. Kumo is worried because it will get dark soon, which could bring complications. Sumu says that, in fact, everything is unpredictable. After all, a portal is a different world, even with unknown creatures. And depending on the dimension, they could find anything from a paradise where the sun never sets to a hell without a single ray of light. There's no way to know until you take that first step inside. The Japanese leader snaps back at the hunter, saying everyone already knows that, and that most portals are similar to Earth. Layla gets irritated and looking at her through the rearview mirror says a portal also takes things from people. It's not just an entry point. Mocking, Hikari asks if she's referring to the nonsense about portal syndrome, where only fools lose track of time. Rambling non-stop, she once again annoys Sue, who asks if they really need to get into that topic. The leader tells them both to calm down. Finally, they announce they've arrived at the isolated area. Hikari observes that the entrance is very large, and Kumo reminds them it's classified as an AA rank. Stefan notes that the exterior cleanup has already been completed. Looking at the crime scene markings, Sumu thinks the mana traces have been lost. He also notices there's nothing unusual on the outside, but it seems someone deliberately erased the traces. As the Japanese pair moves ahead, Layla asks them to wait a moment because she still wants to better analyze the perimeter. But Hikari doesn't want to wait and thinks it's a waste of time to look at an area that's already been cleared, so they keep walking toward the portal. The trio finds them far too impatient. They walk toward the glowing black hole in front of them. From a distance, a group of hooded figures watches them. A young man with his mouth sewn shut comments that this makes his job a whole lot easier. With a grin from ear to ear, he remarks that they're walking straight into death just as planned. The clock hand points to 5:30 in the afternoon. Between the desert mountains, the portal is estimated to be a rank. The group is getting organized, and Layla announces they will begin the investigation in the northern area. Stefan is a bit uneasy since it's been years since they've investigated crimes involving hunters. Stepping into a magic circle, Layla emphasizes that their objective is not to clear the portal. Genesis 3, a skill from the secret garden, is activated. Roots grow like vegetation on the ground and detect mana and living beings. Several strong trees and trunks erupt from the soil with a loud rumble. The leader reiterates that their main objective is to find clues about the drug. Stu analyzes the skill and reflects on it. As she steps out of the circle, Layla says she didn't detect any monsters within a 30-kilometer radius. The hunter watches the strong branches grow, and the leader says she'll do her best to detect enemies, but detection weakens at the borders. For now, her suggestion is to divide the area within that range and begin the investigation there. She reminds them that their priority is to preserve the scene, avoiding any combat unless the monsters attack first. Hikari orders Kumo to sweep the area. Sue starts walking, saying she sure knows how to act like the boss, but the Japanese woman says she's more than qualified for the job. Layla suggests they split up to begin the search. Each person heads in a different direction, and the leader instructs them to report immediately if they see anything unusual. The hunter questions the point of forming a team if that's how they're going to handle the situation. For comments that he really is a lone wolf, the young man continues walking and examining the ground. Right away, he notices a black mark on the ground with smoke rising from it. He crouches down to analyze it and says someone definitely tampered with it before. Picking up the powder in his hands for notes, it looks gross, while Suwoo feels it between his fingers and explains that the mana embedded there isn't natural. He then contradicts himself, saying it actually feels like demonic energy. Suwoo collects a sample of the material and puts it in his pants pocket. An old man answers his phone. He's outside the portal, high up on a mountain. Reporting to his master on the other end, he says he's been observing and has identified a strange group entering, a total of 5 hooded individuals. He exchanges information with Suwoo, emphasizing that the group seems dangerous and that he can intervene if the young man deems it necessary. However, he believes it's better to stay on alert in case they block the exit from outside. After the call ends, Free asks how long the old man has been following them, and the hunter says since they arrived in the city. He points out that the man is an expert in disguises and that Saiwa asked him to follow them without raising suspicion. The little bat is impressed, and the young man boasts, saying that if you've already committed a crime, you've got to find a way to make a living. Returning to his observations, he wants to discover what was planted in the soil that contaminated the local mana. The sun is setting, and the hunter says things are about to get very annoying. Meanwhile, Kumo returns with information for his boss. Tired, he says he searched every corner of the area but found no trace of drugs. Hikari says that makes no sense since the portal hasn't been cleared. Her assistant asks whether that doesn't actually support the idea that everything was found on the outside. Continuing his reasoning, he says that if they assume everyone left, she states that even if they left before entering the portal, if they used the drug to fight, there would be traces. Since the incident, the entire portal region has been sealed off and had access restricted, so if the victims tried to clean it up, there would be signs. And even if they didn't, some leftover materials would still remain. The investigator believes there must be something valuable there, but in any case, they need to find something to justify the operation. Opening a magic circle to activate her skill, she says she's not going back empty-handed and disappointing the branch chief. Within a burst of power, she says she'll dig up the entire ground if she has to. Rare mana might be buried there. Hikari then summons the divine spirit of a giant serpent and commands it to search the terrain. A bright and powerful light emanates from where she stands, reaching into the sky. Layla is terrified when she sees it from afar, especially since she wasn't informed about this action. Stefan runs to check what it is. He rushes off, leaving her alone. Without her noticing, the hooded group quickly surrounds her. Keimu praises the Japanese woman as her serpent flips all the soil upside down at incredible speed. Proud, she says now they'll really see if there's any mana or drugs buried there. But to her surprise, more bodies emerge from the rubble. Worried, she asks if those are corpses, but Camus denies it and runs in front of her. The creatures begin to rise like zombies as the young man explains they are undead that feed on darkness. They rise, hungry, and advance toward them. Camus takes a battle stance against the ghouls. He points out that he's never heard of them acting in groups like this. His master says they'll figure out why after they've taken care of them all. With a command, she orders her serpent to devour the monstrous bodies. The glowing beast obeys, slithering toward them with its sharp teeth and enormous tongue hissing. The weight of its magical body crushes rocks and smashes the zombies. Satisfied, the Japanese leader says loudly, as if scolding them how dare they mess with her. But she celebrates too soon and more undead begin to rise. Her assistant runs, wondering how many of those things are out there. He shouts a warning to the others who are approaching. More monsters close in from behind while she fights on one side. Stefan intervenes with his power just in time, stopping her from being hit. He then asks where all these monsters came from. Hikari questions how they didn't notice any of this during the detection phase, but Stefan says she shouldn't have torn up the terrain. Camus yells that now is not the best time for an argument. Summoning his own skill, the beast's spirit, he charges at the creatures. With the impact of the blow, they're thrown back but not eliminated, and Camus shouts that they have to destroy the heads. His master complains but redirects her serpent for another strike. The animal's tail lashes out and hits 2 more zombies. Hikari yells that her ability is fueled by living energy and won't last much longer, so she tells Stefan to call Layla. The assistant crushes the creature's skulls. He points out that for area-type combat, both his and his sister's styles are the worst match here. At this rate, they won't hold out much longer. Mana drizzles around him. The hunter summons a highly powerful magic circle from which magical arrows shoot out and pierce the undead's heads. Hikari is impressed and thinks that the number is very high, and yet he hits them like easy targets. They all fall screaming in agony before her eyes. Stuart casts the spell with his bare hands, and she wonders once again who he really is. Intrigued, she truly wants to know what his deal is. Stefan catches his breath and feels grateful for the hunter's intervention. He suggests they retreat and prepare a better response for the next day. Exhausted, Camus asks if he and Hikari can leave the portal, but she refuses. Sue tells her to stop being stubborn. If they keep digging everything up like that, they'll just damage the crime scene even more. Annoyed, she asks if he thinks it's fine to lose mana but not time. Out of nowhere, Camus points to something. Another group of undead is rising from underground. Once again, there are many, and Hikari asks why the hell Stefan still hasn't called Layla. He says he's tried several times, but she's not responding. The hunter, visibly worried, asks if Stefan left her alone. Sue takes off running, leaving the others confused as they deal with the monsters. The young man runs frantically while making a call to the old woman. Desperate, he gives the order for her to enter the portal. They need to track the location of the group that entered after them inside the portal. Reaching an area with rocks and mountains, he observes cautiously. Finding a crevice, he tells the person on the phone that he thinks one of them was taken. Layla is gagged. She thinks they've been ambushed. As she watches them, she wonders how they managed to get in if every path leading to the portal was locked. Robert asks his boss if he can kill Layla now, but the man advises waiting since she's bait to lure the others in. Clenching his fist, the old man continues, saying he can't allow any more mistakes or their group won't take control of the black market. He argues that in a world where awakened individuals are ranked by power, you have to ride the wave of the profits to come. He recommends the young man save the fun for later. Robert says he's seen what the drug can do and asks how much longer they'll have to wait for the bony old man's orders. Ivan opens a magic circle using the liquid that drips from his wrists. There are cuts all over his arm from which a black strawberry-colored juice flows. As it drips onto the ground, a black slime begins to writhe. Suddenly, a green hand rises from the earth. The sorcerer summons more undead within his magic circle. He is an incredibly powerful necromancer. The technique he uses allows the manipulation of life and death, defying the laws of nature. Among summoning abilities, this is the worst and most forbidden of all. Watching in awe as his master creates those terrifying creatures, the old man wonders if he's even human. But to rebuild the Almect organization created by his father, he must ally with people like this. Robert asks if the vial he's holding is the drug, and if maybe he could have a little taste. The boss explains that even a small dose can be irreversible, as it boosts a hunter's power to S rank. The user's body can't withstand the force and ruptures from the inside. It's designed to burn the user briefly before annihilating them. Silently, he reflects that it must be crafted using mana, yet it remains undetectable. Ivan approaches, and the old man follows his train of thought and asks who the supplier of the substance is. The young man lets out a sinister laugh. Then he says it's pretty bold of the old man not to control his subordinates, draw investigators here, and still demand to know about suppliers. Stammering, the man asks if accidents like this aren't common when selling drugs. Mockingly, the young man replies that it's a good sign he's not ashamed, but that he won't be providing that information. After all, it would be a real problem if the stupid boss let something slip to the stupid subordinates. Robert becomes furious at how Ivan is talking and gets heated. The half-demon Kiki approaches, telling them to stop making noise since the investigators are still nearby. Ivan seems surprised to see her and asks what he owes the honor of her visit to. Getting straight to the point, she says it looks like he's been doing unnecessary things. She doesn't want to interfere, but some of those actions are putting the entire half-demon group at risk in the name of IZD. The necromancer scoffs, asking if the old-fashioned leader is now going to lecture him. Ivan assures her that if anything happens, he'll just kill everyone and their leader doesn't need to worry. Kiki asks if he's been playing around creating corpses for so long that he no longer understands human relationships. The half-demon walks over to Layla. Looking at her, she says this is getting dangerous. Ivan says he'll keep her alive for now, but Kiki cuts him off, saying no. Turning to Ivan, she says she's not talking about the woman, she's talking about him. Conjuring a magic circle, she says it might already be too late, but he needs to think things through calmly. As they stare at each other, she asks if they're really on the same side. Ivan says all he can do is watch from the shadows. Robert whispers to the boss and asks who those two are. He tells the kid to shut up and play dumb, adding that, in any case, the tied-up woman and the investigators won't survive the night. Stefan, Hikari, and Kamu walk among several bodies, stretched across the ground. The investigator notes that if Sue hadn't cleared the path, things would have been dangerous. Still, he thinks they should call for reinforcements. The Japanese leader once again disagrees because she doesn't want to give up. Her brother grabs her by the arm to get her attention. Someone asks why they followed the path all the way there, and then they come across Sue again. Worried, Stefan wants to know what happened to Layla. The young man explains he thinks she was captured, so he's been measuring mana levels and detected signals coming from a direction. Kamu looks incredibly surprised and asks who could have kidnapped her. His partner seems unable to believe their powerful leader is in that situation. The hunter asks if they really think those ghouls just showed up out of nowhere and says they don't need to follow him, but the three of them run after him. Stefan wants to know if the summoner of the creatures and the kidnappers are inside, and Sue confirms it. Hikari smells something strong. They enter a very deep cave, and Stefan wonders if their leader was dragged into that place. Soon they come face to face with two men and an army of undead. Mocking the situation, Robert says it was nice of them to save him the trouble and come straight to them. The Japanese leader is stunned to see the intruders as her brother charges toward them. Without hesitation, Kamu summons his ability and goes on the attack. Robert gets hit and gets extremely angry, asking if government employees have no manners. He shouts that he's going to make them obey immediately, while Kamu doesn't care and keeps pounding the zombies. The evil boss mocks these youngsters for being just brookies. With his hands, he opens a magic circle and summons the skill Wolf's Spear. A wave of golden lightning surges toward the investigators. Sue becomes extremely irritated by this. The battle begins and several magical points flare up as the young man creates a wall of rock to block the attacks. Hikari thinks about what to do in this situation, since the space is too tight for her to summon the serpent, so she decides to use the distraction to try and find Layla. However, as she moves away from the group, she immediately runs into Ivan. Fearless, she demands that the necromancer step aside immediately. Casting a power at her, Ivan says she's beyond saving. Kenmu runs toward her, shouting desperately. Looking at them, Suwu sees something terrifying. She is running in panic in the middle of that battle. Min Suwu remains completely composed. He is using all of his power. Beams of light shine over the area. The woman with long blonde hair is surrounded by that magic. He wonders about the power behind all that light. The sorcerer smiles and talks about the power of necromancy. He's impressed, as it's the first time he's seen someone using that ability. Another guy appears, cursing him. The boy with glasses challenges him to a fight. He also tells Kiddo that they still haven't finished their business. From afar, a man watches and notes that fortune teller is far stronger than he expected. But according to him, everyone is still at a great disadvantage. The sorcerer considers Min Suwu to be quite brave for not backing down when facing him. He's curious to see whether Suwu will put up a good fight. Suddenly, we see the Winter Gale ability. It disintegrates all the skin off the undead. The enemy says the boy really knows how to wipe out his allies cleanly, and wonders what kind of life Suwu has lived to become so skilled. He has an idea of what it might be. That can only be a man who fed on his own kind. Skeletons continue to spawn around them, and it's disgusting. But the protagonist realizes he still has time to give it his all, and so he uses another power to push the bodies away. In disbelief, the rival finds it astonishing for a human to possess that kind of mana. The man observing is also shocked by what he's seeing, but the sorcerer calls it trash. He considers it nothing more than cheap garbage for first-grade humans. Min Suwu only listens to the insults in silence. The one who hired the demon for that job was a human, and he finds that very amusing. He says he only accepted the job to help trash like Suwu be reborn. To him, humans are far more useful when they're dead. Deep in thought, Min Suwu realizes that all of it is true, and that someone caused all this chaos. He says the demon's noble cause is a disgrace. The sorcerer is offended that a human was able to understand that. Everyone keeps unleashing their powers with fury. He also says the protagonist seems very busy, but Suwu just keeps observing. Frustrated, the rival asks how long he's going to keep that expression. Then Suwu comments that half-demons don't use mana, they use demonic energy. That catches his enemy's attention. He asks what he just said. The warrior says he's a half-demon, a cursed bloodline abandoned by both demons and humans. Even so, he's still here, using his weak powers and thinking he's better than everyone else. That enrages his enemy. He even calls him human scum. The warrior notices that despite everything, his attacks are slowing down. He asks to freeze ready again because he's about to use his powers. He activates his ability and asks if the demon is getting scared. Bothered, the sorcerer reacts with denial. All the commotion makes Min Suwu's body surge with energy. He's extremely pumped. Then he uses his tamer ability. Several iron chains are launched at the demon, and also at the zombie corpses. His blonde friend notices they stop moving. The other allies who are also fighting wonder what just happened. It looks like all those zombies were finally controlled and turned against their masters. Some are still trying to understand what's going on. Nervous, one of the men begs Ivan to do something. The zombies begin to attack them, but the rival doesn't understand how so many undead could be controlled all at once. He finds it all absurd. Fed up, the warrior asks who that guy really is. Ivan is so shocked by what he's seeing that he questions whether Suwu is even human. Boasting, he says he feels stronger after his last move, and Free says he's going to throw up. He tells the little bat to rest and assures him he'll handle the rest. With a shout, he commands the monsters to go after Daddy. Ivan can't defend himself and unleashes all his power. He causes a massive explosion with lightning bolts blasting in all directions. Cornered, he sees no choice but to go all out against his opponents. Floating behind him, Suwu asks if that's really all he's got or if there's something else to show. Surprised, the enemy realizes he's using an acceleration ability. Ironically, the young man thanks Ivan for breaking the wall, then conjures a spell of golden lightning between his hands. The intense glow blinds everything and nearly renders the half-demon unable to see. Next, a burst of sparks explodes in Ivan's direction. Smiling, the half-demon girl steps in and places herself in front of her partner, creating a protective circle. With the word crow, she faces Suwu with a smile. Bored, the young man says he didn't think she'd interfere all the way through and asks if killing's off the table. Sitting beside Ivan's body, the demon girl notes that he's still useful. But when he stops being, the young man can do whatever he wants with him. Kiki asks Suwu not to fight the half-demon now, and the hunter considers backing off even knowing the threat he poses for the future. Analyzing the situation, he thinks he needs to prioritize, especially since his whole team is weakened. Besides, he knows the demon girl is more powerful than she appears. He asks her who the half-demon involved in the shady business it is. Kiki admits he knows a lot about the group, but says things are different now. The faction currently in power is moderate, but the incident with the bodies was caused by Ivan alone, using their name to accept the commission. Kiki clarifies that she doesn't know who his client is either. Sue becomes frustrated with the claim and asks how she can say she's uninvolved when Ivan acted alone and she doesn't even know who's behind it. She denies involvement, explaining that she only intervened to keep Ivan alive and that they don't know anything about what he was plotting. Sue stares at her with suspicion and listens closely as the half-demon says he probably has a lot of questions, but she can't answer them either. The young man doesn't seem to believe what she's saying. Team 1 walks, exhausted, toward the exit of the portal. Reluctantly, the young hunter accepts Kiki's explanation, but in a threatening tone promises there won't be a next time. Joking, she asks how he could believe her, but Sue reveals he read her mana pattern and lies were shown up in the waves. Kiki looks bored and the hunter says he has one last question. He wants to know who the we is that she keeps referring to. With a sly look, the demon girl says that she'd answer it. Emanating a beam of blue light, she reveals that she is Aiz. Teleporting away with Ivan's body, she leaves Sue thoughtful, and he concludes that the half-demons aren't involved. He analyzes that using half-demons as subordinates wouldn't be a good profit strategy since they're hostile toward humans. He feels an unsettling power being released from the drug, but it's not dark energy, it's a source of power he's never seen before. Recalling the last bit of information Kiki gave him, the young man says aloud that he's going to investigate this so-called IZ group. Layla apologizes to everyone and says she's ashamed, thanking them for saving her life. As she speaks with the group, Sue approaches. Kahari immediately asks about the necromancer, and the young man explains that he escaped because he had reinforcements. Once again, Layla blames herself for the situation. Cammy steps in and says they should leave the portal first and discuss everything afterward. The 5 of them seem lost and in silence. The hunter reflects that to avoid all this drama, he prefers working alone. Not completely alone, he still has Frey, and thinking that he calls out to his little friend but gets no response. Looking toward the now empty portal with its ominous aura, Sue calls out for Frey again, but there's only silence. 2 days later, at HMC's headquarters, Blackwood is stunned to learn about the ghouls. Even more shocked, he says he's never heard of a necromancer and can barely believe they weren't the ones behind the drug. Now reflecting, he apologizes for being complacent and assuming it would just be another field inspection. But Sue smooths things over, saying no one could have predicted that situation, and they were lucky not to be injured. The vice president agrees and says that thanks to him, everyone can return to work immediately. Edward says that the famous mad dog still has sharp skills, but the young man modestly replies that he's going back to Korea. Blackwood is surprised and asks him to at least say goodbye to the team, but Sue claims he's too busy for that. While walking down the street, someone catches his attention. It's none other than the Japanese leader who suddenly appears in his path. Humbly, Hikari thanks him for healing her and says she showed a pathetic side this time. As she walks past him, downcast, she says that next time she'll definitely be of more help. Sue doesn't really care and keeps walking. Now the young man is more concerned about Free's absence, who hasn't shown any signs since that day. While flying back to Korea, he thinks there's no issue in using the abilities he got from the little bat. The hunter wonders when that little guy will wake up again. The secretary reports that the Middle Eastern branch identified the Almec group as active in the drug market and that they attacked Himwon. Even so, they weren't connected to the drug's production, but after the death of their leader, the suppliers cut ties. Looking through the paperwork, Blackwood asks about the status of the portal. Showing photographs, she points out that it was damaged due to combat and should be closed soon, concluding that things will get complicated if the faction leader thinks they destroyed the crime scene. Blackwood sighs and asks why bring up that topic, but the young woman argues that all the advisors are under the president's control. She reminds him that Director Kajol Dwan is monitoring Blackwood's actions and will definitely stir trouble over the case. As she says they need to minimize risks, someone suddenly opens the door, sarcastically noting they forgot to knock. It's none other than the special hunter from the division, Kajol Dwan, the very person they were talking about. Walking toward the desk, the old man already starts talking, saying he heard about the drug investigation and that things didn't go as well as the vice expected. Provocatively, he says rumors have already spread and everyone knows Edward even hired an Asian hunter to help with the investigation, emphasizing that on top of everything, the team damaged the site and returned without any significant leads. Irritated, Edward Blackwood points out that Juan is wrong and that the team fought and defeated the intruders who attacked them. The man says they only found the small organization and uncovered nothing, while the esteemed vice recruited just some random hunter. Blackwood stares at him, visibly annoyed, and Juan asks if at this pace the investigation won't be severely delayed. He then proposes that they make the investigation public. Letting out a sarcastic laugh, the vice doesn't hide his outrage at the idea, explaining that if the information leaks, more people will learn about the drug's existence, and the situation will spiral out of control. Juan adjusts his suit cuff and maliciously counters by asking if the goal isn't to eliminate the supply chain. Leaving, he stirs unease in the air by saying that even without making it public, those who want the drug will get it anyway. He ends by suggesting they listen to the opinions of other special hunters like himself. The vice president is deeply irritated by the conversation. Sue learns about the possibility of the case going public over the phone and completely disagrees with the idea. He emphasizes that he intends to wrap this up with his own hands, although the case is more complex than he imagined. In the same meeting room, the bald man comments that he saw someone use necromancy with his own eyes. Meanwhile, the young man continues on the phone and says he's investigating pandemonium and IZ, but hasn't found anything significant yet. He spins a pen between his fingers while listening closely to Blackwood. Regarding the portal, the vice says that after they returned, he sent another team, but the portal is useless and nothing was found. Sue seems interested in this information and listens as the vice explains that due to the bodies, the portal was classified without prior analysis. The fact that only Carrion remained proves that the necromancer and the Almet had already been there. Blackwood asks the young man's opinion while he reflects on the trio they faced. Portals are like mouths connecting dimensions, and there's no way of knowing their origin, so they couldn't predict where an empty portal would open. The hunter makes notes and mental maps of his clues. He speculates that maybe that wasn't a real portal. Scratching his head, he suggests it could be just a magical dimension disguised as a portal to sell drugs. Edward laughs on the other end of the line, saying that would be impossible. Either way, he knows his friend has good instincts and will investigate that angle too, hoping Sue will continue contributing. Then the call was ended. Immediately, one of his proteges interrupts him, asking if they can play, while the old man in disguise scolds the boy for that. But Sue accepts his colleague's invitation. One of them tries to slip away quietly, but is stopped by the bald man. After a few stretches, Sue thinks Free might finally wake up. The silence of the night falls over downtown Seoul. Some people are gathered in line for a nightclub. Inside, a group of young people dance. A well-dressed young man walks among them. Stopping in front of the VIP door inside the venue, he orders the security guards to step aside. But one of them says the password, "Shadows have no color," to which the young man replies, "Only the red strawberry juice remains." The door opens for him. Inside, a young man waits for him standing. Wearing sunglasses and holding an intimidating posture, he greets him, saying it's been a long time since they've seen each other. The visitor agrees and asks if things are going well. Observing his guest, the young man says yes and wants to know if the Great Sink is with him too. Sitting on the couch, the young man says the drug investigation has broken out in Korea and they'll suspend trips for now. Agreeing with the decision, the boy snaps his fingers and says he'll arrange security for his departure then. At that moment, a woman enters the room swiftly. Stopping in front of the man, she lights her cigarette while he says that the police are messing everything up and he can't return right away. Another man arrives and is surprised by the tattooed man's visit. It's a young man made up like a clown who seems pleased to see his ally from John. John sarcastically comments on his arrival, saying he's always very punctual. He then apologizes for making the guy distribute such a large amount, explaining that there will be interference even before things begin. Pointing to two briefcases on the table, the assistant shares the good news and asks if the clown wants to check what's inside. The mobster unlocks and carefully opens it. Faced with a pile of cash, he's left in awe. It's a quiet day at the office. Two employees come across Sue, and the girl jokes that it looks like someone actually came to work. Gossiping after passing by him, the two comment on the vice president's visit to headquarters and the hunter being summoned. They speculate about what kind of connections the young man has but goes silent when Hwang Jong-bu approaches. Leaning on Sue's cubicle, he asks if the hunter has seen the official documents that surfaced. The hunter asks if he's referring to the drug case and says he's not surprised the investigation went public. His friend is surprised to see the young man already knew and questions if the business trip was because of that. Regarding the secrecy, Sue says he just did what was asked of him. But his colleague finds that unacceptable, as he requested assistance from a staff member, but not even the branch director was aware of the case. A young woman interrupts the conversation, calling for the team leader. She says the director is requesting both him and Sue immediately. In the office, the man stares at them for a moment. Thinking it over, he begins to speak. As they know, directors have officially requested cooperation for a large investigation across all countries. He notes that he's already aware of the drug and of Sue's involvement in the investigation during his last business trip. The hunter confirms the information, but the director questions what exactly happened during the incursion. Growing desperate, he asks in anguish why such expectations were placed on the Korean branch in particular. The team leader is confused by this reaction. Disturbed, the director shakes his head, and the young man says they were clearly marked and needed to show results. He asks what kind of major results they expect from such a small country like Korea, which also happens to be the cleanest when it comes to drugs. With his mind spinning, the director says that a request came directly from the board of presidents, but if he gets marked now, his promotion is over. Calmly, Sue asks if they should just give up then. The man says absolutely not, and that no matter what happens, if the young man is promoted, he must never forget he's part of this branch. Basically, their goal now is to deliver the highest possible performance in this investigation period. To that end, the boss orders that the entire team led by Hwang Jong-gu will be reassigned to this awakening drug investigation. Putting on the pressure, he emphasizes that if the team fails, they'll stain the reputation of the entire Korean branch. Of course, other teams will be investigating too, but the biggest cases and the main locations will go to Gangbuk. Jong-gu is nervous about all of this and tries to argue back, saying there will be a lot of resistance from the other teams. Ignoring the team leader's words, he turns to Soo and says he will authorize any travel, but expects him to contribute to the domestic investigation. With everything explained, the director announces their first mission. There's a huge pile of papers and documents on the table in front of them, and the leader questions how there's already a demand this urgent. Recently, he asked the data team to compile all suspicious cases, leaving the staff exhausted from the workload. To summarize, he explains that significant activity was observed at a large abandoned warehouse located on Manhwa Island. The location is already known as a drug spot, but new movements involving people from even other regions have started to show up. And for some reason, awakened criminals have been fighting there among the debris, with both small and large-scale conflicts identified. Reviewing the paperwork, Jong-gu thinks the case is too big for just their team, and the director reveals he requested one more group from the company. The ones coming are already familiar with the investigation too. Soo wonders about this group while looking at the tablet screen. It's a very sunny day. Abandoned containers and trash pile up around the warehouse. A truck approaches and parks. Soo is surprised to see who arrived. The team called for internal support is none other than his brother and Yeowa. The two walk toward him and the young woman asks who else he expected it to be. Teasing, the young man asks if they couldn't have just sent subordinates instead. His brother asks where the rest of his team is. The hunter explains that they're on standby in case of strange movement, and besides, having too many people would be a burden. Yeowa agrees with the strategy, especially since there might be more civilians inside who came looking to buy the drug. She elaborates that the observed conflicts are probably between the dealers or between their guards. Soo comments that either way, it'll be good to round up the addicts while they're there. Analyzing the warehouse before them, the girl observes that it really does look like a distribution point and asks if they should go in. But Soo's brother suggests the best strategy is to split up and disguise themselves, with one part entering through the front while someone looks for alternative entrances. While the duo discusses their ideas, the hunter hears someone approaching, talking about famous clubs. Making a quick hand signal, he asks the two to stay silent. Sneaking around the container, Soo tries to catch the conversation and hears one of them saying he came from far away for the amazing products. Two guys walk toward the gate, commenting that the awakening drug turned everything upside down, but making good money is what really matters. The trio keeps squeezing into the space to hear more, and one of the guys says he's been in the business for 15 years. Suddenly, one of them asks about Zhang Quan's arrival in the city, and the other confirms he traveled here just to deal with it. It's been months after all. Surprising the pair, someone asks, "Who's Zhang Quan?" The dealers are startled by the trio standing in front of them, and one of them says addicts should enter through the other side. Soo smirks and says he's not interested in drugs. Intimidating, the hunter simply says they're coming in through the same place. The two dealers are left tied up on the ground. After passing through the gate, Soo asks what the best strategy would be, but to Yeowa, the plan is just to beat everyone up. Thinking, the brother asks them to come closer quickly. He carefully pulls a pen out of his jacket and transforms it into a massive staff. Min Sejin conjures a large magic circle, evoking the ability Secret Light, which hides the physical body. Soo analyzes the conversion spell as he becomes translucent. Yeowa gets excited as she didn't even know invisibility magic was possible. The young man explains that elemental magic is his specialty and it can be used in countless ways. He then explains that the refracted light hides their appearance. Soo comments that if Free were with them, he'd be thrilled to eat that ability. His brother then asks where the bloodsucker went, and the hunter dodges the question. Proudly, he comments that Sejin has grown a lot. Embarrassed, Sejun asks not to be treated like a kid while Yeowa demands recognition too. But the hunter loses patience and urges the two to hurry up and get this over with. Inside the warehouse, a few men are talking. A sale is announced loudly. Negotiating, one of the dealers tells a customer he can't sell at that price. Among syringes, some addicts lie on the ground as the high hits them. Invisible, Yeowa crouches near them to get a better look and sees no signs that they use the awakening drug. Sejun comments that a substance like that should be sold in a more private location and suggests they listen in on conversations to find out more. The young woman points out that the place is massive and has way too many of those guys to arrest, but Soo's brother disagrees, saying it's useless to catch them if they'll be released the next day. Even if they shut down one of these markets, another will pop up. It's only effective if they dismantle the organization itself. The pair notices someone making a strange noise. Out of nowhere, a completely strung-out guy runs toward them in distress. He runs right past them and disappears into another part of the warehouse. The men who were dealing get distracted, and one of them comments that the guy's high and used the drug right there instead of going outside. Curious, the other wants to know why those with the craziest behavior crawl down into the basement. The team listens closely, and the young woman comments that the place is so awful it gives her chills. Soo orders them to stay there and keep observing while he splits off. Sejun and Yeowo want to go with him, but the hunter firmly tells them to stay and stay quiet. They have no choice but to obey. Calmly, the hunter enters what looks like a subterranean sewer used to escape the police. The environment is dark and quite complex. Soo feels a strange energy in that place. He can't quite describe the sensation. It's not like mana. It's similar to the summoning used by the investigator he met recently, but unlike summoning a spirit, he even wonders if it might be spiritual beasts. With his hands, he initiates one of his powers. What he sees is not exactly what he expected. He doesn't sense an evil aura in the air and questions what exactly he should call that. He guesses they're just ghosts, and a little girl appears, asking him not to hurt her friends. The protagonist is startled and wonders how she was able to see him through his ability. He observes her, a dirty and lost child in that place. He asks who she is, and the little girl answers his question with one of her own. She says that place is her home. Sue questions how a sewer could be her home, and the girl replies that home is wherever her body can rest. The warrior has another question for her. He wants to know where her parents are and why she has so many injuries on her body. The girl says her parents abandoned her to buy weed. She's alone there. And the injuries happened while she was searching for food. Concerned, Sue asks if she's been living there alone with those ghosts. Suddenly, the little girl begins to use her power. But she says her powers are weak compared to Big Brother's, and the protagonist realizes she's the one who made those ghosts visible. The girl confirms it and says her friends protect her, warning her when the bad men are coming and showing her how to navigate the maze. With a smile, Sue says that's a good thing. It'll probably be useful for him. He asks what her name is, and the girl says it's Cyan. Then the young man says they should ask her friends for a favor and asks if they can find the bad men in that labyrinth. Cyan confirms that yes, they can. On the other side of the room, a thug asks if that was really what he thought it was. His partner confirms that yes, it was a pure compound. In other words, just one dose would be enough to deal with any ranked hunter, making it an extremely rare and difficult substance to obtain. The thug is worried about side effects, but relaxes upon learning that apparently there are no risks. The two of them are in a disgusting place, but there's a reason. This is the secret compound, and the thug says he knows exactly what he's doing. A strange sound fills the space. Everything feels suspicious, and the man asks if the other heard something too. He did, but doesn't seem to care. He then comments that it's probably just a rat, sounding unfazed. It was definitely not a rat. There were rumors something strange was happening down there. Suddenly, the shadow of a hand brushes across his face, and the two thugs begin to panic. They run in fear, assuming it's the sound of a ghost. Suddenly, Minsu appears at the doorway carrying Cheyenne on his back. He confirms it's definitely not a ghost. Using his mist powers, he attacks the men, slamming them hard against the wall. Then he says he's not a spirit, he's a person. Minsu tells Cheyenne to hide for her safety and says he'll come get her afterward. And he thanks her for helping him find the henchmen. Ironically, he asks why the guys didn't share something so good with him too. Minsu tells the man to get up, but nothing happens. Maybe Sue hit them too hard. That mysterious compound was on the ground next to the briefcase it had been transported in, but it looked damaged. Our hero already suspected that the compound was in Korea. Sue was caught off guard by an overwhelming presence. It was a guy with scars on his face who mocked the protagonist, calling him a little rat. The henchmen try to figure out how Sue found that desolate place where they were hiding. Maybe word of the compound had already spread. But the scared man disagrees. He believes there's a traitor in the group. With the hero under his foot, he suggests the others take Sue out of there. Still on the ground, Minsu summons his powers. Large beams of bright purple light fill the room. They hit all the surrounding enemies. But the scared man wouldn't be defeated that easily. Our hero realizes his opponent is faster than he expected. In this battle, the enemies start devising a plan to counterattack Sue. Sue wants to know where these guys came from, but he is interrupted by his opponent, who noticed that Minsu hadn't taken the damage he expected. All the thugs surround the protagonist, mocking him, saying he pretended to be dead. Minsu replies that it's better than hiding in the ceiling. Annoyed, one of the henchmen asks which guild Sue belongs to. Calmly, the hero smiles. Then he launches a new attack, lifting his enemies by the neck. With his rivals still in the air, Sue asks if anyone is going to answer his question. The scared man returns to the scene and comments that the protagonist has been listening to a lot of rumors lately. Then he begins to channel his powers through his hands. At that moment, he uses his lion's roar ability, making both of them unleash their full strength. The criminals manage to escape that trap and fall to their knees on the ground. Facing his main opponent, Sue says he wouldn't want the compound even for free. His rival asks about its current status. Minsu praises the defense but says with disdain that it was just a warm-up. However, his opponents, who don't even know Minsu's identity, are already badly injured. They realize the battle could be deadly and launch a more powerful new attack, like an explosion. One of the henchmen grabs a vial of the compound from the floor. Those who were more seriously hurt decide to take the compound. A strong hand appears quickly. Then we see the face of the henchman who had just taken the compound. They both become strong and regenerated, now looking powerful, and they use their abilities to try to defeat the protagonist. The warrior realizes their power has indeed increased significantly. Determined, his enemy keeps trying to strike him, now with a new ability. Minsu notices the exit no longer looks like it did before, and he flies toward the henchman, smiling as he realizes none of them can live without the compound anymore. With his hands, the young man prepares another ability. Beams of light flash through the entire area. Smiling and curious, he comments that he forgot to attack one more guy. Meanwhile, the skirted man smiles, believing he has captured the protagonist and brought it all to an end. However, suddenly Kang Yoa appears with a new ability, and beams of fire are launched directly at the enemy's face. She comments that one way or another, they always end up chasing him, and she asks, smiling, if the master will let her and her brother join in as well. Wiping his hands, Sejun says those people really were quite problematic. Agreeing, Yoa says the ones who took the drug are abnormally strong. But even so, they're nothing like S-rank hunters. Sue asks how the duo knew what was happening and arrived so quickly. The protagonist's brother then says the one responsible is the huntress, who ran off to follow him. Embarrassed, the young woman says that either way, when she came down there, the child guided her. The little blonde girl appears at the door and says that 3 against 1 was an unfair fight. Our boy approaches the girl and thanks her. Curious, the red-headed young woman asks who she is. Sue says he'll explain everything later. Looking around, his brother says they can't let a child live in that place. Then, upon seeing a vial, he states that illegal strength-enhancing drugs have finally arrived in Korea. Since it's the first time he's seen someone who took it, Yoa says the increase in dosage probably leads to death. The protagonist asks if the duo has ever heard of the Ghoul Slayers, since those guys were at least A-rank hunters, experienced in killing people, which means there's a high chance they were all fired from the facility producing the illegal drugs. Saijin asks if the protagonist is saying there's a large organization behind it like Bestia, and if Minjun suspected demons were also involved in the incident. Our boy confirms it but says it's only a suspicion. Then he asks if it's possible that someone among the humans is working with the demons to cause all of this. While cleaning up, Yoa says it really is strange how Mad Dog's presence vanished over the past 10 years. If that's true, it could even cause a war between humans and demons. Sue agrees that there are at least 10 of those bastards, but since the trio is still breathing, it would be better to take them in for further investigation. Suddenly, the little blonde girl warns that she's detected something dangerous approaching. Quickly, Sejun and Yoa go on high alert. Grabbing the child, our boy manages to shield her from the massive explosion that follows. Then, someone approaches and says the protagonist should have done a proper cleanup instead of leaving the guys alive. So now we'll show him how it's done. We see that the man in blue has brought his battalion. Our boy asks if the group operates in even and odd numbers. Protected by Sejun, the little girl begins to leave the room while the young man thinks the mana levels of that group are different from the ones they fought earlier. Stepping forward, the protagonist says the criminals arrived at just the right time, and asks if the man in blue is the boss, while wondering in his head if the Blue Flower Guild leader sensed something. Then he says that since 2 of the enemies are S-rank hunters, they'll need to take everyone out right here. The guild leader says the boy doesn't need to know if he's the boss. After all, he's going to kill them all. Saijin says his brother can leave the hunters to him, while Yoa says she'll provide cover. Without hesitation, Sue charges at the man in blue. Amused, the man says he uses some pretty familiar martial arts and asks if he was taught by a hack, since he's terrible at fighting. Furious, the enemy activates his power and asks how the boy dares say that, then delivers a powerful blow. Worried, the huntress calls out to our boy as she fires an arrow that hits the group's leader. Angry, he decides to target the young woman. Leaping to safety, Yoa wonders how her ability's power has returned. Suddenly, one of the masked guys says she doesn't have time to get distracted, staving the huntress beautifully. Saijin says the guy is right and that they should deal with the weaker ones first. We see that 2 hunters are already down. Shouting, the young man tells Sue to get up now. Scratching his head, our boy says Sejun uses weird techniques, and smiling, he thinks that his body finally remembers what it's like to fight as a team, concluding that the feeling is really good. Turning, he asks if his allies are already warmed up, because they'll have to finish the fight in 10 minutes. With his ability, the protagonist charges forward with everything he's got, putting the group leader in a tight spot. While attacking, Sue says the man has been drawing powerful attacks for a while now and asks if that right-handed strike is his only skill. Preparing to attack, the man in blue says the boy talks too much. Knowing exactly what the man is doing, our boy says he's absorbing and returning the opponent's attack energy, using, in fact, a counter skill. Caught off guard, the man realizes he's in trouble. With a smile on his face, the protagonist says now he won't be able to use his trick anymore. Liu manages to dodge Sue's blows, and with his arm injured, he decides to ask how someone like the boy is able to use the Azura ability. Attacking again, our boy says it's pretty obvious, then reveals that he was the one who created the technique. Upon being hit, the man in blue is sent flying. Quickly realizing he won't be able to recover because he's going to be attacked again. Explaining, Sue says mana can take many forms depending on how one uses the energy core. Thus, when these forms are systematized and named, they become Azura. Running, the enemy concludes he needs to create a chance to retreat, then asks for number 1 to come to him. Appearing behind the man, the protagonist says he really shouldn't let his guard down. Throwing his opponent once again into the distance, the man crashes into the wall with such force that the concrete cracks. Sue picks up a vial of the drug from the floor and says he only answered because the man asked. But since the leader has no intention of listening, it would be better to switch roles, since he's the only one there who can still speak. Cornered on the ground, the man asks who the hell the boy is. Crouched down, our boy says he clearly doesn't listen since he just said it's his turn to ask questions. Grabbing the enemy's face and shoving the vial of the drug into his mouth, Su asks why he gave it to his subordinates but didn't take it himself, and who's responsible for the distribution. After spitting out the vial, the guild leader says that product seems like a knockoff, and that no matter what the boy does, nothing will change. Because survival belongs to the fittest, and ever since the gate opened, the strength of awakened abilities is all that matters. So a new drug just like that one will appear soon, even if he takes down a few dealers. Annoyed, the man asks if it isn't a blessing to shine for a moment, since the weak are always consumed by the strong. Grabbing the enemy's neck, our boy says that following that dumb logic, he'll win, since he's stronger. With the blow, the man in blue spits out strawberry juice from his mouth. Preparing to finish the job, the protagonist says it's better the man answer before being consumed, then asks who the bastard is that made the illegal health-enhancing drug. After his question, all that can be heard are screams. Watching everything, Yo holds the child in her arms next to Sejun. The young man then asks if the huntress doesn't think Sue has changed a lot compared to 10 years ago. Smiling, the young woman says yes, he's gotten stronger and more ruthless. After all, no one can spend 100 years in a completely unknown place and come back the same. With arms crossed, the glasses-wearing young man says his brother seems like someone who came back after losing something, often acting as if he weren't even human. Disagreeing, the huntress says the young man still has the same essence and will find what he lost. Suddenly, our boy interrupts the conversation and asks what it is that he lost. Sejun says nothing and asks if he found out anything. Wiping his face, the protagonist says he didn't find out much. Only that the distribution of the drug began simultaneously in several regions, with the main hub for Asia being in China. Since the guy exploded before saying anything else, probably because of a man oath. Worried, the young man in glasses says in that case they better head back. Still holding the child, Yoa says she'll try to find the girl's parents. Thinking, Suwu says that if they don't end the operation soon, the drug will spread uncontrollably. Then concludes that there must be a control point for the Korean region. We're taken to Nara, a private club. Inside, a man with a neck tattoo asks what they mean by the factory was abandoned. In front of him, another young man says HMCS raided the location and because of that, they lost contact with Liu and most of the group of Oni assassins. The tattooed man then asks about Fu. The younger man says he's very anxious from not hearing about his twin, but is still under Daejeong's orders. Annoyed, the tattooed man says that's awful, since he was planning to return home the next day. Suddenly, his phone rings. Answering it, he asks Daejeong what's going on. Daejeong then says he heard the Korean operation ran into a problem. Confirming, the man says that just as he was instructed, they released the drug in several regions at once, which made them catch the scent. Smiling, the man in red says he already knows, after all, he was the one who leaked the information to the HMCS, because even if they lose a few trade points, it's only a matter of time until they gain full control. While HMCS will stay busy with abandoned factories, so the man should focus on moving more product. Worried, the short-haired man says that if he does that, he'll be tracked, which isn't good, especially since they already lost contact with Liu and the Oni assassins. Daejeong tells him not to worry because the team signed a confidentiality contract. And besides, all capable hunters in Korea died 10 years ago, so they should stay right where they are. We're taken to John's office, where he says numerous distributors and common addicts were arrested inside the abandoned factory, and that the sales website was completely destroyed, yet even so, this can't be considered a major victory, since everyone involved in the illegal sale of drugs to Awakens was completely wiped out. Jonggu then says the group claimed they had no other choice, as the users were extremely sick. But even so, they managed to recover a good portion of the original drug and also discovered that the distribution network begins in China. Juven asks if he really thinks that's enough. Annoyed, the man asks what else they could have done. Crossing his arms and not responding, the director asks if the other teams made any progress. The blue-haired man says his team is still investigating, but there are very few leads. Beside him, the silver-haired young man says it's the same situation with the South team, which had to retreat after being attacked. Furious, the director asks why they're all so incompetent. Jonggu decides to ask if the man is even sure the illegal drug is really circulating. Yelling, the old man demands to know if the hunter thinks HQ made it all up, especially knowing the Japan branch is also in total chaos. He says that's not exactly what he meant. Jian then states that even if they manage to obtain the drug, there's no way to analyze its ingredients without sending it to HQ. Whispering, the two young men comment that the man is way too obsessed with climbing ranks. Still furious, John asks where Sue went. Jonggu then says the boy took a day off, saying he had a lot to take care of. Elsewhere, Yoa asks if the protagonist liked it. Saying yes, our boy asks if it's really okay to accept it so easily. The huntress says it's more than okay. Agreeing, Sejun says it's only fair the boy has his own home, especially since he lives with others, the Do that used to sleep in the office and Shu never leave him alone. With the little girl holding his hand, the protagonist says that since she's a natural awaken, it might be hard for her to adjust to another place. Smiling, Yoa says the child is a rare talent, then asks her to obey the master well, because she'll come visit every day. Saijun says he'll also be there daily, considering how much he spent. That place is practically his second home. Laughing, Sue asks if that's what they were planning all along. He's immediately taken back to the past when his team was still together, and Daejeong asked why they needed to live together if the goal was to drive out the demons. Our boy said he needed the young man by his side because no matter what happens, he'll always protect his own. Yeowa tells the boy to stop being rebellious, but he says they're not Sue's kids. Thinking, the protagonist says he lived 100 years in another world, surviving and clinging to the memory of that moment. And in the end, he wasn't able to protect everyone. The protagonist returns to the present moment, affirming, still in thought, that this time, things need to be different. Turning, Cyan says he's walking too slowly. Smiling, our boy says that when Frey wakes up, he's going to be really surprised. Then says he's on his way. The day passes quickly, and we see the little girl sleeping comfortably in her bed. On the phone, Sue asks Jonggu if the lab said the connection wasn't clear. Confirming, the man says that although the illegal drug exhibited a previously unseen form of mana, the idea of a connection to demons is just speculation. Since demonic energy is no longer a rare resource on Earth, you just need to go to Huchinrak to get it. He adds that no country wants to start a war over baseless rumors. The protagonist says he understands and hangs up, then states that unfortunately, demons have earned humans' trust. Sorting through boxes, he thinks about how it feels like they're being led off track. And with no leads on pandemonium, the investigation might come to a halt. Possibly the only solution is that Minjun researched demonic energy. Our boy decides to do more research on the computer. He quickly finds an article written by his disciple discussing the correlation between demonic energy and soil contamination. However, when trying to access it, he finds the blog is restricted. Irritated, Sue says that, as always, the security is too strict. Then wonders if it's really just a coincidence. Suddenly, Shan appears and asks what he's doing. Surprised, our boy says he didn't know she was still awake, telling her she should go back to bed soon if she wants to grow. Holding her bear, the little one says that even when he whispers, the ghosts, they still tell her everything. And shocked, the protagonist says it was just a short call, but the little girl says it's always been like that. And that's why she heard everything those scary men said before he arrived. Curious, Sue asks what she heard. After a few seconds of silence to remember, Cheyenne says she heard that John Kian entered the country, and that the goods were unloaded in Narakud to be spread everywhere. Elsewhere, we see a blue-haired young man running. Suddenly, something throws him against a wall. The person responsible says he finally found him staring at the young man. A guy in gray clothes asks how he dares to look at the gate of his guild, being a worthless C-rank hunter. Taking something from the pocket of his blazer, the young man says he couldn't help it. He needed more to buy something. Confused, the pair of aggressors ask what the hell he's going to do. The blue-haired young man pulls out a vial of the drug and takes it immediately. Then a huge explosion occurs. We're taken to the emergency agency meeting at AGMC's headquarters, where someone comments that the drug is appearing gradually, which is worrying because at that rate, it's only a matter of time before it spreads like wildfire. A man with pink hair says HMCS branches in each country are doing what they can, but the situation isn't good. He then asks how the investigations are going, which makes Jian visibly nervous. Before the man can respond, someone comments that the incident in the Korean branch produced no meaningful results, since a mere low-level employee claimed that China is the main drug distribution center in Asia, without any proof. Agreeing, another man says that doesn't sound like something investigative agencies known for their greed would say. A bearded man asks the others to stop being so harsh on the vice president, since he must have his reasons. Therefore, it would be better to entrust overall management of the case to the hunter who said those things about the distribution center. After being completely pressured, Jian decides to agree. 2 days later, at the Korean branch of HMCS, Jonggu asks how come Sue will be the general head of the investigation, then states he's clearly being used as a shield. Agreeing, Sue says it probably has more to do with the internal power struggle at HQ than with any real expectation of results. That's why the man should try to find something for himself first. Looking at the paper the protagonist handed him, the team leader asks what Narak is. Explaining, our boy says it's testimony from a child who was in the abandoned factory, and that Narak is a key word. The man says that could be a bar, a restaurant, or even a company. Our boy then asks how an investigative agency can't find where traffickers gather. Concerned, Jonggu says the agency is still national, even if in a small country, and there's a chance the criminals didn't even register a commercial name. Sue then tells him to request investigative cooperation from the 7 major guilds of Korea. The team leader says it's a confidential investigation, but the protagonist says they just don't need to give out detailed information. After all, as head of the investigation, the branch manager can't do anything, and Sijun and Yeowa always come running when called. Jongmu says it's because the Dew has a connection with him, but our boy tells him to shut up and asks if he wants to please everyone, only to realize later what happened. After all, the hunters in the country become addicted to the drug. Then he says if not, the man should stop talking and make the calls. We're taken to the presidential office of Changwo-da. Inside, the man tells Gillian it's been a long time. The current master of the Immeasurable Legion Guild just nods. Getting straight to the point, the president asks if the matter has to do with the guild. Shoving the papers, Gillian says an investigative cooperation request was sent from HMCS to all guilds included in the heptagram. Surprised, Chung asks what she means by that. The woman then says all detailed information is confidential and the request is for on-site investigation and data collection related to awakened criminals, berserk hunter phenomena, or cases of rapidly increased strength. The man then asks how a mere agency front dares to request the cooperation of the heptagram under those terms, and if this could be the work of Mad Dog, who seems to be moving without restrictions. With his hand on his chin, the president says the woman can do as she pleases. After all, she's the master of the guild. Gillian picks up a pen and begins to write something. The next day, Jonggu asks about the written refusal that arrived. The blue-haired girl says that all the guilds, except for Immeasurable Legion and Frozen Soul, agreed to the request. With his hand on his head, the team leader says that's actually good, since he thought all of them would refuse except Empire and Kingwa guilds. Stu enters the room and asks about the conversation they were having earlier. The man then says the boy arrived at the right time. Looking at the list of guilds that signed the agreement, the protagonist asks if it's rare for someone to transfer to HMCS after working at another guild. The blue-haired young woman says it's more common than you might think, and explains that, as hunters, the pay and treatment are lower compared to guilds, but there are also people with a sense of duty toward a public institution. The protagonist starts reading the guild names and says they should keep an eye on the guys from Diamond, White Lion, and Warrior King guilds, because there could be someone inside. HMC is leaking information. The brown-haired man asks what that has to do with the guilds cooperating with them. Stu then says the investigation involves a lot of profit for the distributors, making it very likely that a major guild is involved. After all, it's suspicious that they accepted the cooperation request, unless of course there's something to gain or a reason to comply. Our boy asks if his reasoning makes sense. Before Jongwoo can answer, Kim bursts into the room and announces that he's finally found the most likely location to be Narak.